taken certain things out of context. Because while much has been said about value and about cost and about fiscal space, I want to suggest that worth and value are not one and the same. Value is what we can measure, what something costs, what it returns, and how it balances on a ledger. But worth is about something much deeper. Worth is what that investment means in the lives of our people. It is the difference between a number on a page and the reality that people experience. It is the worker facing rising costs but still able to get to work reliably. The parent navigating higher prices but accessing support with dignity. The young person still able to see opportunity despite global uncertainty. And so, Mr. President, while in this chamber and in the other place we have to be responsible in how we manage the country's finances and resources, we must also be honest about what we are here to do. Because governance is not simply about minimizing costs, it is also about maximizing impact. It is about deciding what is worth investing in, even in the most difficult of times, particularly in difficult times. Because when the world is unstable, the answer cannot be to retreat into hesitation. It must be to invest more deliberately, more strategically, and with greater clarity of purpose in the systems and people that allow this country to function and endure. Mr. President, these estimates are not simply a financial exercise, but a statement of belief. A belief that even in the face of global instability, we must continue to build, to strengthen, and to move forward. We knew and we said in COVID, no retreat and no surrender, and that must continue to be our motto in a world that continues to change the rules on us. We must have the confidence to invest in ourselves, because ultimately the question before us is not only what these allocations cost, but what they are worth to this country, and whether we are prepared to make the investments necessary to ensure that Barbados continues to progress. We are no longer at a stage where we are building from scratch. That has been said before. We have already laid much of the foundation, and so the task before us is no different. It is to make the systems work better, more reliably, and more fairly for our people. The question now is not whether these systems exist, but whether they consistently deliver in a way that improves the daily lives of Barbadians. Mr. President, I want to say that I stand here to say that this Barbados Labour Party government has continuously done that. We have to commend the Minister of Finance for delivering a budget that it is both sound judgment and a clear understanding of the realities facing countries like ours. It is about determining where we invest, who we prioritize, and how we balance competing needs in a way that is both responsible and responsive. And that balance, Mr. President, is made even more complex, and we cannot understate that it is even more complex by the world in which we operate. Mr. President, as a young person, I have to say that I am now understanding what my mother meant when she said, "Don't rush to grow up." The truth is that I don't feel like she warned me or prepared me enough, because if I am being honest, Mr. President, I did not expect to be dealing with a war, the climate crisis, coming out of a pandemic, and all the other things that we have endured over the last few years. It feels like every single global issue that I ever learned about in history class got the same calendar invitation and nobody put it on my diary. Mr. President, what we are dealing with is not the norm, and so we cannot treat to it as if it is. There has been a suggestion over the past few days in this chamber that this government cannot point to what it has accomplished with the resources of the state. But that assertion does not stand up to scrutiny. One only has to examine the record, and if you are unable to do so, then you can check our red record to see the tangible ways in which this government has worked to improve the quality of life for Barbadians across infrastructure, social protection, economic stability, and public services. And I say this further, Mr. President, that the clearest endorsement of the record did not come from us in this chamber or in the other place. It came from the people of Barbados themselves. In the last general election, Barbadians expressed their confidence in the strongest possible way. Now, that does not mean that we are perfect. We have never claimed to be such. However, it does mean that when Barbadians weigh the options before them and when they assess the performance, when they considered who they trusted to manage the country's resources and steer Barbados forward, they made a decisive choice. And that choice, Mr. President, was grounded in record. And so today I wish to share some thoughts on the allocations to the Ministry of Transport and Works, as well as the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, with particular focus on the Social Empowerment Agency, the One Family Program, and the National Crime Prevention Program. I do so because these are ministries that shape the everyday experience of Barbadians. These are the ministries that meet people where they are at, in their commutes, in their communities, and in their homes. And Mr. President, when we examine the allocations to these ministries, we are ultimately examining how government is responding to some of the most immediate and tangible needs of Barbadians, and whether we are building systems that improve the lives of people. As I prepared for this debate, there was a sound that resonated very strongly with me, because it speaks to something deeply familiar. And one particular line says, all I want to do is live a little, breathe a little, and go on, enjoy life. Because every mickle make a muckle, no bother watch it trickle, because things soon all right. And it speaks to the idea. I know that the senator is often in a rush, but I ask that I hope that there are moments, where he actually slows down and takes his time. So this line speaks to the idea that life is lived in the everyday, and that progress often comes not in dramatic moments, but in small, steady improvement over time. It reminds us that people are not simply trying to get by, but rather to live with a sense of ease, dignity, and hope that things are moving in the right direction. It reflects a quiet but powerful truth that people measure progress not by announcements, but by how their lives feel from one day to the next. Whether the bus comes on time, whether the road is passable, whether groceries are affordable, and whether systems respond when needed. And these are the moments that shape people's confidence in their country. And so, Mr. President, that line captures something quite profound, that real development is not a spectacle, but whether the average Barbadian, the most vulnerable, and the marginalized feel like life is becoming manageable. Mr. President, development literature often reminds us that real progress is not built on grand promises, but on solving real problems in practical ways. And as political scientist Harold Laswell reminds us, politics is ultimately about who gets what, when, and how. Those two ideas taken together go to the heart of what we are doing in this chamber. Against that backdrop, Mr. President, I turn to the Ministry of Transport and Works, because when we talk about development in real terms, we are really talking about how people move through their everyday lives. And right now, for many Barbadians, that experience is being shaped by one central issue: traffic. The ability to get from home to work, to school, to the supermarket, to an appointment, to just drive around safely, reliably, and without unnecessary stress is not a luxury. Our traffic challenges are no longer isolated frustrations or occasional inconveniences. For many, it is a daily reality. We feel it, and it frustrates us. This is time taken away from families, from rest, from productivity. It is the parent trying to get home after a long day. It is the student trying to get to work, the worker trying to be punctual, the small business trying to meet deadlines, And when that becomes a norm, it wears on people. Commutes that should take 20 minutes are stretching into an hour. Parents are leaving home earlier to remain on schedule. Workers are arriving tired before the day even begins. And around this country, people are asking one simple question: why is it so difficult to move? And that is why the allocation of $159 million to the Ministry of Transport and Works must be understood as part of an integrated effort to address these traffic woes. Because traffic is not caused by one issue. It is the result of multiple systems not working together as efficiently as they should. It is roads, it is drainage, it is transport availability, it is route coverage, it is infrastructure, and yes, it is also behavior. Mr. President, what we are seeing from this administration is an attempt to tackle these layers simultaneously. And so we've heard much talk about flyovers, but the allocation to this ministry also shows that it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Neither is there a rush to get to a solution that will not resolve our challenges. And so there are also public consultations happening. I know the Honourable Senator mentioned that we are doing it backwards, but it's okay to have your idea in your head and still speak to other people. It is perfectly fine to decide that we want to take this route, but we are open to other suggestions because we understand that all of the ideas, all of the solutions do not reside here. On the infrastructure side, there has been a rehabilitation of over 70 roads across Barbados, including key corridors that carry heavy volumes of daily traffic. That work is not just about smoother roads. It is about improving the flow of movement across Barbados and reducing bottlenecks. We've also seen the investment in equipment, modern asphalt pavers, milling machines, graders, and road repair units that allow the ministry to move even more quickly and more efficiently in addressing deteriorating road conditions, because potholes and poor road surfaces don't just damage vehicles. Mr. President, this approach is clearly reflected on the Head 510 Road Network Services, where we see an increase of $15 million. That increase is about more crews on the ground and more roads being repaired. Most notably, Mr. President, this is seen under sub-program 513, Residential Road Construction and Maintenance Services, which provides for road repairs and improvements in communities where people live. Here there is an increase of $12 million. This money is being allocated to gaps and to neighborhoods. The road outside your house, the road that you reverse on, the road that you cut through in order to avoid some traffic. When these roads are filled with potholes and even surfaces and even broken edges, people feel it immediately. Tires burst, shocks suffer, vehicles have to go to the mechanic more, and simple drives become stressful. It makes it difficult for some persons to walk, particularly the elderly, or for persons living with disabilities to navigate their own communities. And ultimately, it makes them uncomfortable in the very spaces where they should feel more safe. And so this increase means more patching crews, more resurfacing, more consistent repairs in neighborhoods that people use every day. Because the truth is that while we may pave the highways and the main arteries, everybody does not use the arteries to get where they are going. And if I never use a road, the reality is that for most people, it does not matter to them. If I never go to St. Andrew, or I never have to take a highway in Christchurch to get to work, it does not matter to me that this road has been paved, because it does not affect or improve my daily life. And so this allocation seeks to ensure that more people are feeling the work, the good work that is being done by the Ministry of Transport and Works. Under Head 510 Road Network Services, we also see a range of sub-programs that reflect a comprehensive brick-and-mortar approach to improving how our road network functions across the island. These represent the actual work taking place on the ground in communities and along the roads Barbadians use. We see, for example, continued attention to tenantry roads in some of our most underserved and vulnerable communities. These are the roads people depend on to get in and out of their homes, often in areas that have historically experienced inconsistent maintenance. Investment here means better access once again for residents and even better conditions for emergency services. We also see the continuation of road rehabilitation under CAF, which supports the upgrading of key roadways across the island that allows for the repair of sections of roads that have deteriorated over time. This is the kind of work that extends the life of our infrastructure and reduces the need for constant repairs. Under highway construction and maintenance services, we are looking at the upkeep of major arteries of this country. These are the roads that carry the heaviest traffic and the ones that people rely on to get to work, to school, and to conduct business. There is also provision for bridge construction and maintenance, which is critical in ensuring continuity across the network. When they fail or deteriorate, entire communities can be cut off or forced to take longer, more difficult routes. And this does not include the work being done in the Scotland district, Mr. President, because we see a dedicated road and bridge rehabilitation for the Scotland district, which is particularly important given the unique environmental challenges in that area. The terrain is unstable and this infrastructure requires special and ongoing attention. Finally, the roadway beautification project focused on highway verges ensures that our main roads are not only functional but safe to use. So when we look at Head 510 in its entirety, Mr. President, what we are seeing is a full spectrum approach: community roads, highways, bridges, and even verge upkeep, all working together to improve mobility across Barbados. It is practical and it is visible work. Mr. President, when we turn to Program 511 Drainage Services, and in particular Sub-Program 515 Maintenance of Drainage to Prevent Flooding, we begin to see a much more structured and forward-looking approach to addressing one of the most serious challenges facing this country. We see provision for climate change adaptation works, including maintenance and construction of wells, the rehabilitation of existing systems, and the development of retention ponds, box drains, and check dams. These are not small interventions. These are physical engineered solutions designed to control water flow, reduce runoff, and prevent flooding in vulnerable and low-lying areas. We also see investment in the modernization of how we manage drainage infrastructure. Provision is made for consultancies to update drainage systems alongside the development of geographic information system and a storm water management system. Now that sounds technical, but the truth, and very simply put, is that managing water effectively requires data, mapping, and planning. It means understanding where water flows, where it collects, where interventions are most needed. It moves us away from reactive responses and towards a system that can anticipate and manage risk even more effectively. In addition, there is the provision for purchase of machinery and equipment, including roadworks machinery and storm water level loggers. This matters because without the right tools, even the best plans cannot be executed. And importantly, Mr. President, we see targeted flood mitigation works in specific areas. These are communities that have experienced flooding, real disruption, and in some cases, significant loss. So this is intervention where it is needed most. But Mr. President, we must also connect this to the fact that poor drainage does not only lead to flooding, it leads directly to the deterioration of our roads. When water is not managed, it seeps into the road base, it weakens the structure, and it accelerates the formation of potholes and cracks. So the work we are doing on the roads can be undone if drainage is not addressed at the same time. In that sense, it is not separate issues we are dealing with, but it underpins the transport system that we are trying to address. Mr. President, for the average Barbadian, this is very practical because it is the difference between heavy showers passing with minimal disruption or turning into a situation where homes are flooded, or roads becoming impassable and communities being cut off. It is the difference between driving on a road that holds up after rain or one that breaks apart. It is about safety and peace of mind. Mr. President, when we turn to Program 512, particularly focused on the Scotland District, we are looking at one of the most complex and vulnerable areas of infrastructure management in this country. The Scotland District, as we know, is not like the rest of Barbados. And so its soil conditions are unique, and its road network is consistently under pressure from land movement, erosion, and heavy rainfall. And this is why the work must be continuous, and we see this reflected in the estimates under sub-program 516, with a significant increase of over $5 million, just up from under $2 million in the previous approved estimates. Mr. President, the reality is when the roads in the Scotland District deteriorate or become impassable, the impact is not simply confined to those communities alone. It affects the entire transport networks. When key routes are compromised, traffic is forced onto alternative roads, creating bottlenecks, increasing congestion, and placing additional strain on infrastructure that was not designed to carry that volume of traffic. This is not just a rural issue, it is a national one. And so we see in particular capital expenditure rising to over $4 million for assets under construction, and it points to more substantial work being undertaken. This includes stabilization efforts, road and bridge rehabilitation, and ongoing maintenance designed to keep critical routes open. This work is not straightforward. It requires engineering solutions to take into account shifting land, drainage problems, and environmental pressures. But for the people who live and travel through the Scotland District, it makes the difference between access and isolation. And so this work is about preventing the kind of disruption that ripples across the wider road network, and also ensuring that no community is left cut off because of terrain and neglect. I want to turn very quickly to Program 510, Electrical Engineering Services. And we are therefore continuing the same conversation about safety, but from a different angle, because lighting is what determines whether these roads we are investing in can be used safely at night. And I will say very plainly that too many of our roads are still dark. There are communities where lighting is inconsistent, where outages persist, and where entire stretches of road feel very unsafe after hours. And this is not a minor issue. It affects how people move and whether they feel secure and whether or not they feel comfortable participating in life. I also want to say as a woman that darkness is not neutral for me. If I say that I'm already nervous in certain instances about traveling the street at night, and this has nothing to do with the violence that we are seeing increase, but just generally, then a dark neighborhood or a dark stretch of road makes it even more uncomfortable and makes me even more nervous. And so a poorly lit road is not just the inconvenience, but it makes me very hesitant to do very simple things. And it affects whether, and this is for everybody, whether you feel comfortable walking home, waiting on transport, or even stepping out in the evening. I remember when I was a little younger, I don't really run much anymore, Mr. President, I have to admit. But before, I remember being younger, and because some of the places that I would have to walk after work were a little dark, I would hitch my bag up and I would run home. The reason for that is to get as far away from a dark area as quickly as possible. And so to me, this is really a quality of life issue for everyone. And so that is why we see the significant increase in the government electrical engineering department, with the total rising to over 15 million, alongside substantial investments in machinery and equipment as well as capital works, so as to strengthen the ministry's ability to install, repair, and maintain street lighting across the island, and to respond more effectively when outages occur. And so when we link this back to the broader discussion, we see a system being invested in and prioritized in order to respond to a challenge that Barbadians have very publicly said has become unbearable. Mr. President, this government's approach to public transportation has approached public transportation with a clear understanding that it is not simply to service to be managed, but a social lifeline that must be strengthened and modernized. The Transport Board forms the backbone of how many people move across this country, and the policy direction thus far has been deliberate, that no Barbadian should be disadvantaged because of where they live. That principle matters because in small island states like ours, access is everything. And so we have seen a focused effort to strengthen the public system in a way that allows Barbadians to move. We have seen continued investment in the Transport Board, recognizing its role as a stabilizing force within the system. The acquisition of over 100 electric buses between 2020 and 2025 represents a significant expansion and modernization of a very old, fleet with less efficient vehicles. This has been supported by route restoration and expansion into communities that rely heavily on public transport, ensuring that people are not cut off because a route is no longer viable from a poorly commercial standpoint. And that is the difference between treating transport as a business and treating it as a public service. Beyond fleet expansion, there has also been attention to the broader commuter experience, upgrades to terminals, improvements in facilities, and efforts to integrate technology and improve scheduling. These are small steps, but they contribute to a system that is more predictable and is becoming more user-friendly. Because at the end of the day, Mr. President, what people want is simple. They want to know that when they leave home, there will be a bus, that it will come in a reasonable time, and it will get them where they need to go safely. Now, Mr. President, are we near where we need to be? No. And it would not be honest to suggest otherwise. There are still gaps in service, still delays, and still frustrations. But what we are seeing is a government that recognizes those challenges and is actively working to address them through investment, through reform, and through a policy direction that places people at the center. Transportation is about fairness. It is about ensuring that persons' access to opportunity is not determined by geography. I want to also quickly acknowledge that infrastructure alone will not solve the challenges that we are facing. We can invest in roads, improve drainage, expand lighting, and we must. But there are also conversations we need to have as a society about how we interact with these systems. Mr. President, indiscipline on our roads is a real issue. Reckless driving, disregard for traffic rules, improper parking, and a lack of patience all contribute to congestion and in some cases accidents. If you are in a rush to get where you have to go, you are reckless and you cause an accident when nobody can move. We are all stuck here and you still can't get where you have to go. And so no amount of road expansion or repair can fully compensate for behavior that disrupts the flow of traffic and puts others at risk. So while government must continue to invest, there is also a responsibility on all of us to use roads in a way that is safe and considerate. We must also begin, Mr. President, to think more creatively about how we reduce pressure on the road network. There were lessons taught by COVID that I was hopeful we would continue with. And so conversations around flexible work arrangements and remote work become important. Not every job requires a daily commute at the same time. If we can stagger work hours, encourage hybrid models where possible, and reduce peak time congestion, we can ease some of the strain on our roads without having to build our way out of every problem. These are practical, modern solutions that many countries are already embracing, and we need to move beyond presenteeism in Barbados and give serious consideration here in Barbados. The other thing I want to address is something that undermines the work that we are doing in drainage, and that is littering. Mr. President, when garbage is discarded irresponsibly outside through the bus window, through the car window, it ends up in drains through illegal dumping. It ends up in drains and in gullies, blocking the very systems that we are investing in to prevent flooding. So we cannot, on one hand, spend millions of dollars clearing drains, and on the other hand, allow for these drains to be clogged through careless behavior. It is ridiculous, it is irresponsible, and quite frankly, it is unsightly across Barbados to see how we treat to our litter. And so government is doing its part and is invested, as you see from these allocations, to doing its part to improve the system, but those improvements have to be sustained with a shared commitment from all of us, because development is not only built on policy, it has to be sustained by behavior. I now want to turn to the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elders Affairs and to focus on the National Crime Prevention Program, the Social Empowerment Agency, and the One Family Program. Because if the work of the Ministry of Transport and Works is about how people move through the country, then the work of this ministry is about how people live within it, especially those who are most vulnerable. It is about whether individuals, Mr. President, and families are supported and whether communities are stabilized, whether we are addressing the root causes that give rise to social challenges or simply dealing with the symptoms. And so these programs sit at the intersection of social protection, community development, and national stability. They speak to how we respond to poverty, how we intervene early to prevent crime, and how we create pathways for people to move from vulnerability to opportunity, or as Senator Ford likes to say, from internship to ownership. Because development is not only measured by infrastructure or economic growth, it has to also be measured by people's ability to thrive. And so when we examine these allocations, we are really examining how government is investing in people, their dreams, their potential, and the social fabric of this country. Mr. President, I turn to the National Crime Prevention Program because if we are serious about development in this country, we must also be serious about safety, and this government is exactly that. This program is evidence that this government has recognized that if we are to build safer, more cohesive communities, our interventions must come earlier, be more deliberate, more consistent, more integrated, and bring more partners into the fold. The National Crime Prevention Program represents an understanding that crime does not exist in isolation, but is linked to deeper social issues: unemployment, lack of opportunity, family instability, disengagement from education and community environments where support systems are weak. And if legitimate sources of inspiration fail to appear, illegitimate sources will thrive. And so the approach here is not to punish, but to prevent. It is about identifying people, particularly young people, who may be vulnerable to negative pathways and providing them with alternatives through mentorship, skills development, structured programs, and community-based interventions. This matters because oftentimes prevention is not visible in the way that enforcement is. You do not see a lot of times the impacts or the people who are working, the way how community groups and community organizations can change the trajectory of a young person's life, but you definitely see when the police is escorting them into or outside of the courthouse. You definitely see them on social media when they've been charged. And so it means that you do not always see the success of a crime that did not happen. A young person who chose a different path, or we take it for granted that some young people are just going to be excellent. And I want to say that all young people are at risk. There's simply a difference about the type of risk and the level of risk at which they exist and will interact with. And so this program speaks to a philosophy of governance that says we cannot police, and it's getting very exhausting to hear people consistently say to every response within the legal system that we are seeking to police our way out of crime. That has not been the approach of the government. That has not been the intention, whether you look at the Division of Youth, whether you look at the cultural programs, whether you look at community development, the Youth Advancement Corps. When you look at all of these things, the narrative that the government is attempting to police its way through crime or doing absolutely nothing is either political or simply incorrect. And so enforcement has its place, and we understand that and we recognize that. But it has to be complemented by an investment in people. And so we are all aware about the concerns around crime and around violent crime and the anxieties that exist within communities. But this program represents a recognition that a sustainable response must address root causes, and it also recognizes that it cannot be done by the government alone. And so you see the allocation and the grants to civil society organizations. Some of the most meaningful interventions, and community work is very dear to my heart, the third sector, is happening at a community level through youth organizations, through faith-based organizations, through mentors, through coaches and individuals who are already doing the work. The government does not need, and we understand that we do not need to reinvent the wheel. We also understand that we have to engage with the gatekeepers in communities. We have to engage with young men who are at risk of that behavior, who may be involved in that behavior but want to find a way out, and those who are simply trying to find their way through this thing called life, because I don't know if anybody else feels it, but there is no guidebook on how to navigate this. And so, Mr. President, we are working together with people through the National Crime Prevention Program with a shared commitment of changing outcomes where it matters most. And so the allocation to the National Crime Prevention Program is an investment in safer communities paired with the work being done in enforcement and in young people for the long-term stability of this agency. Mr. President, yesterday my colleague spoke very briefly to the Social Empowerment Agency. In this financial year, a sum of $127 million has been allocated. It reflects a deliberate restructuring, as she said, about how social services are delivered. It combines 5 agencies: the Welfare Department, the National Assistance Board, Child Care Board, the Resilience and Reintegration Unit, and the National Disabilities Unit into one single coordinated system. She also said it is a major shift in the fragmentation because it is more organized, more efficient, and it is also more dignified. We know that Barbadians are proud. I don't like walking about and telling everybody my business. What's going on in my house, you're not to know outside. There are people who grow up in one-bedroom homes, who grew up with very little and nobody else knew. Some of us have never shared the circumstances under which we have been raised, or the challenges or struggles, because you don't carry your business out there and broadcast it on the street. That is not how it is done. That is not how we do it, as far as I know. And so this reform matters because for too long you have to navigate multiple systems. I got to tell my story to 5 different agencies. I got to say the same thing over and over. After asking twice feels a lot like begging to many people. And it is one thing to say that if you want the help, you are going to go and get the help. But at what point does asking for help demand that you lay your dignity at the door and come on your knees like Oliver Twist? And so what this says is that you will come, we will do it once, and we will do it right. We will allow for you to come and to interact with the support that you need without repeating your circumstances and meeting different requirements. We will allow for you not to have to wait longer than you need to get the support. Because if I'm coming this week for a bill to be paid, then it probably means that I need the bill paid and I'm desperate for it to be done. And so what we also understand is by doing this, we allow for children to also grow up in better homes. The integrated approach allows for families to find help in one place, those families that need it most. And so what the Social Empowerment Agency does is simplifies the journey. It is seamless, it is integrated, and the needs are assessed more holistically so that the responses can better align to what the most vulnerable people need. It is about ensuring that the system works for people rather than people having to navigate their way through the system. Mr. President, this is a matter of dignity because social support should not feel transactional like a series of hurdles. It should feel respectful, responsive, and human. And so there's a greater opportunity for persons to receive support. I also believe that it is important that we recognize the gendered reality of social support in this country. A significant portion of those who rely on these services are women, particularly single mothers who carry the dual responsibility of earning and caregiving, often within very tight financial constraints. Every time I have to go to a different office, that is another day or another set of hours that I lose at work. And many women, many single mothers within the system work in some of the most volatile industries that exist, particularly hourly. And so when the systems are fragmented or difficult to navigate, it is these women who feel the burden more acutely. So this reform is not just administrative, it is also about equity, about simplifying access and improving coordination. We are easing a pressure that disproportionately falls on women and strengthening households and communities that depend on them. Now, Mr. President, reform of this scale does not occur overnight. Systems must be aligned, processes refined, staff supported throughout the transition. What we are doing is reimagining the way that we have done something for a very long time. But the direction is a correct one, because a fragmented system cannot effectively serve people. The last thing I want to talk about under this ministry, Mr. President, is the One Family program, because this is where policy meets people very directly. If the Social Empowerment Agency is about improving how the support is delivered, then One Family is about ensuring that support actually transforms lives at the household level. It represents a shift from long-term assistance to structured engagement, working directly with families to address the underlying challenges they face. Mr. President, the strength of the One Family program is its hands-on and personalized approach. Each participating family receives a dedicated social worker, ensuring that the support is personal, that it is intimate, it is continuous, it is responsive. That relationship allows for a deeper understanding of each family's circumstances and the development of tailored plans that reflect their specific needs. Most importantly, the program does not only focus on income, it incorporates health. So I know that my comrade, Senator Connell, will be happy to hear that. And it recognizes that stability is not possible without financial well-being. Because if a family is struggling with health issues, there is no amount of financial assistance alone that will move them forward. And so this matters because a lot of Barbadians are not simply asking for assistance. They want a way forward. They want hope. They're asking how to do more than to make ends meet. They want to support their families, and they want to maintain a basic standard of living in the face of rising costs and ongoing economic pressures. And the One Family program partners with the private sector to do exactly that, because I reiterate that government cannot do it alone. And so this program recognizes that vulnerability is interconnected and our response must be the same by addressing challenges related to employment, health, education, and family dynamics that do not exist in isolation. Mr. President, one of the things I want to touch on very quickly is that if these things are going to work, those of us who can must. We must not only, I'm not talking just about finances, I'm talking about time. Mentorship goes a long way in addressing some of the challenges that we have. Giving back matters. There are so many things that I can point to in my life where volunteerism and mentorship assisted me as someone who grew up in a family where my mother was a housekeeper, a domestic worker, because housekeeper sounds a bit fancy, and my father was a mason, and it was seasonal. He was not necessarily attached to a company. Some days he would just leave home and say he'd go in and check the job sites to see if he can make a dollar. Sorry.
We understand.
Right? And so the truth is that if we refuse to pour back into our community in a meaningful way, some of the challenges that we are experiencing will contort themselves into other formations. And what I want to say is that I see a lot of discussions happening on social media. You could count the platform, you could even get down to brass tacks and you will hear the issues that are occurring. And so I believe that we have to ask ourselves, we continuously ask of the government, what are you doing for us? And at some point in time, the question must be, how can we also help ourselves and help our communities? How can we give back? And it doesn't have to be like some persons in here leading a 6-week program or 8-week program, but an hour a month? How does the child in your neighborhood that might need a pair of shoes, or somebody to say a nice word, somebody to give them a glass of water, somebody to get them a birthday cake, somebody to teach them a skill, how do you pour back into them to change their circumstances? Because there are lots of people that if somebody hadn't poured into them, they might be on another side of the law. And I just felt it very important, Mr. President, to make that aside. And there's also one last issue that I want to tackle, and that is the question of risk for a government. Because there's a tendency to believe that in uncertain times, the most responsible governments are those that do the least, spend the least, and wait until every outcome is guaranteed. That is not governance. That is hesitation. And in the world that we live in, where I could go to sleep at 11 o'clock, wake up at 6 and realize that the world is on the brink of a war, and that a strait that most of the 20% of the oil in the world flows through is now closed, and people are bombing left, right, and center, airports are closed. Oh, Mr. President, hesitation and inaction has a cost. Risk does not disappear when we choose not to act. It just shows up in another form. It shows up in the things that we never build, the opportunities that never materialize, and the communities that are left waiting. It is the creative who does not have enough space to perform and whose talents remain unseen and unsupported. It is the community that does not get to revive its go-karting tradition, losing not just an activity but a part of its identity and history. It is the street fair that never comes to life, and so the community vendors in there lose income. Young people lose opportunity. Communities lose a chance to come together in a meaningful way. People remain disconnected, disjointed, and the country suffers. These are the quiet costs of inaction, Mr. President. And they may not always appear immediately in the estimates, but they are felt in the absence of the vibrancy of our country, in the slowing of economic activity at the grassroots level, and the erosion of community life. So for those of us who have tabulated wastage, my question is, what is it worth to you to have vibrant communities? To to have a country where people feel connected, where small businesses are able to ply their trade. And when we speak about risk, we must be clear that there's a risk in doing, there's a risk in testing, but there's also a risk in failing to do something. There's a risk in investing, but there's a risk in holding back when investment is needed. Because underinvestment has consequences, Mr. President. Delay has consequences. And often those very consequences are not absorbed by the government. They are absorbed by the people of this country in their everyday lives. And so responsible governance cannot be about avoiding risk altogether. It is about taking calculated and deliberate risk in the interest of national development. It is about recognizing when the cost of waiting is greater than the cost of acting. It is about understanding that investment, whether in infrastructure, in communities, in culture, or in people, does not always produce immediate returns, but is necessary to build momentum and resilience over time. Because, Mr. President, if we are honest, many of the systems and opportunities we benefit from today exist because at some point a government chose to act ahead of certainty. They chose to invest, to build, to create space for growth, and not because it was risk-free, and not always because they were certain of the returns that they would get, but because it was necessary at that point in time. If we had decided that independence was too much of a risk, we would not be a republic. If we had decided that the only time to grow was when we had nothing to lose, Barbados would not be celebrating in the way that it is, and would not be noted as a country that punches above its weight, that speaks loudly and boldly in rooms where other Caribbean countries are waiting for invitations and having silent meetings. Mr. President, if we are continuing the trajectory that we are on, we cannot now retreat into a mindset that confuses caution with progress. And so what you see in the estimates, Mr. President, is a government that is not reckless. We do not need to be lectured on financial prudence. We know exactly what it is. We have demonstrated it. It is also one that is not paralyzed. It is a government that recognizes that leadership requires both discipline and courage, and one that is prepared to take responsibility for its decisions, because we understand not only what those decisions cost, but also what is possible for the people of this country. I want to reflect on a sentiment raised yesterday as I close, that we must not dream in the clouds, but remain practical in our approach to governance. And I agree to a point. But while governance demands discipline, realism, and careful stewardship, progress has never come from playing it safe. It exists in the space between what we know and what we dare to imagine. It is built when we take what is practical and push it just far enough to create something better from our people. So, Mr. President, we have to decide what we are willing to sow. Because development, like anything of value, requires investment before it yields results. It requires patience, consistency, and belief. And in that sense, I return to the simple but powerful idea that has guided my contribution. Mickle to muckle. That real progress is built step by step. That decision by decision, investment by investment, it is not always dramatic, it is deliberate, it occurs over time, and those steady small choices accumulate into something meaningful. So these estimates reflect a government that is attempting and that will balance responsibility with ambition, realism with progress, and immediate needs with long-term development. It reflects a government that is invested in infrastructure, in people, and in systems and everyday life. And so we not only commit to these estimates and delivering them, but also to imagining in new ways how to move Barbados forward. With that, I am obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator Trim. Senator, the Honourable Shane Archer. Morning, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues and the young people who are here today representing various organizations. You know, Mr. President, they say when a batsman walks out for his maiden innings, it's always a nerve-wracking experience. The heart beats a little faster, the balls come a little quicker, and the field somehow seems a bit narrower and tighter than it really is. And I must confess, sir, that rising to make my first contribution in this honorable chamber carries a similar feeling, especially since it's responding to appropriation bill. But having watched the solid start laid down by the batsmen before me in the other place, I am confident that I will settle in quickly. And in this place too. Not on that side, but I may settle in quickly and by God's grace make a useful contribution to my side. Mr. President, I rise with humility, with gratitude, and with a great sense of responsibility. To stand here and to make my first contribution is not something I take lightly. It is a privilege, it is an honor. I know the saying goes, to whom much is given, much is expected. And it is a moment shaped by my family, my mother, my sisters, my brothers, my aunts, and by my faith and by my community at home in St. George North, where the action is, and by the example of those who form me. Permit me, sir, to express my respect and thanks to our Honourable Prime Minister, not only for selecting me, a young person, to serve alongside her in the Division of Youth and Culture, but for her courage, her clarity, her confidence in the people of Barbados, which continue to shape the direction of this republic, sir. Through you, sir, I want to say thank you to the Prime Minister, that her belief in young people, her insistence that Barbados must think boldly, her refusal to allow this country to shrink in its own imagination, has opened doors for a new generation of public servants and a new generation of political representatives. I also rise, Mr. President, with full awareness of the legacy of my father, who stood in the other chamber for over 25 years. I know the weight of that history. I know the seriousness of public life because I saw it up close. I saw the difficult decisions. I saw the long meetings. I saw the unglamorous side of service, sir. I also saw the burden of carrying other person's hopes, even when your shoulders are tired. So I do not enter public life with illusions. I enter public life with my eyes open and my heart ready. And Mr. President, permit me to call a name. My Aunt Sheila Archer Ashby, God rest her soul. She was one of those people whose influence cannot be measured only by title or by position. She was a community woman in the truest of Bajan terms. She had a way of making people feel seen, making people feel heard, embracing people without conditions, sir. She believed that leadership was not about who you could impress, but who you could include and who you can influence. She believed, sir, that of a politics of humanity. Hers was a life of service. Long before many of us started to speak about social cohesion and inclusion and these type of terms, she was already living it. And I remember many days she would cook some food in a big pot, and there's only 5 of us to eat, but a pot that could feed about 30, and at the end of every evening, all was gone. And that was so because everyone in the community would always come and get a share of food, a plate of food. And sir, as a young senator, I will be failing my generation if I did not take a look around this chamber and acknowledge the amount of young persons who are sitting among us. Sir, a progressive Senate. On our side, we see Senator Strim, Senator Odell, Senator Benjamin. In front of me, Senator King too. On the other side, we see Senator Floyd, my old schoolmate, Senator Slocum, and Senator Waters to some extent, even though that his party might be giving him a few gray hairs before his time. He's still relatively a young man. And I say all of this to say, sir, it is not lost on me, nor do I believe on any of the younger senators in this honorable chamber, the immense opportunity and responsibility that we bear. At least for me, sir, I intend to be guided by the spirit of those words we know all so well. To do credit to my nation wherever I go. Mr. President, I come to this chamber as a young voice, but not as an empty voice. I come with conviction, with memory, with urgency, and I come for love of my country, Barbados. And because I love Barbados so, I must speak honestly about the Barbados that raised me. Sir, I grew up in a Barbados where community service was not a branding exercise. It was not a performance. It was not something that you only did if there was a stipend attached. It was part of our moral instinct. It was normal to help, normal to show up, normal to volunteer, normal to clean a gap, normal to help the church, normal to attend a school event, normal to assist a neighbor, and sir, normal to help the elderly, because that is what decent people do. Now, Mr. President, sometimes people say that young people do not know that Barbados. That they say that young people do not know sacrifice. We do not know duty. We don't know volunteerism. We don't know community. I do not accept that as the truth, sir. Very often when a society keeps telling a generation that it knows nothing of service, nothing of discipline, nothing of shared responsibility, some begin to inhabit the low expectation placed upon them. And if you tell people often enough that something noble is not for them, some will eventually stop reaching for it. But that does not mean the capacity was not there. And that is why I reject easy cynicism about young people. Gen Z is sharp, expressive, entrepreneurial, and globally aware. Generation Alpha is coming behind us, sir, with extraordinary fluency in technology, imagination, and innovation, sir. These are not weaknesses. We must see them as assets. But every asset requires a moral frame. Talent needs values. Innovation needs purpose. Confidence needs character. So the question is not whether our young people have capacity. The question is whether we will summon that capacity in the correct direction. Mr. President, there's a phrase we hear too often right now: what is in it for me? And while I understand the economic pressures that many may face, and I understand that modern life can push persons towards survival thinking, I still believe that Barbados must resist the danger of becoming a transactional society. Sir, a nation cannot survive on transaction alone. A nation must also live on trust, on duty, on memory, and on common purpose. That does not mean I am condemning my generation. Far from it. I believe young people want purpose, sir. I believe young people want meaning. Young people want to belong to something larger than themselves. But if all we see modeled before them, or modeled before us, is extraction, noise, vanity, and division, we should not be surprised when they start to begin to mistake those things for success. Mr. President, I spent some time on this because this moment in our national life, it is about more than economics. It's about the kind of Barbados that we are protecting and the kind of Barbados that we are preparing. Sir, I've spoken about the places and people that form me. Let us now turn before the matter before this House, the Appropriation Bill 2026. Sir, from the outside, I want to say I support this bill wholeheartedly. It was masterfully laid before the other chamber by the Minister of Finance and defended and explained by the Prime Minister and those in the other place and also up here as well. And there's a reason, sir, why this budget was called a people's budget. Because this bill is fundamentally about people. And I want to submit to this chamber that this is, in a very real sense, a youth and culture bill. It is a youth and culture bill because in a direct sense and in the deeper sense. It is youth because it invests in future. It is culture because it protects the character of a people in the present. Mr. President, culture is not only the song, not only the dance, not only the festival, not the stage or the costume. Culture is also the way of how ordinary people live. It is how we move through the world. It is how we shop. It is how we raise our children, how we stretch a dollar, how we keep our dignity in hard times, sir, how we preserve habits of a family, neighborhood, a nation, enterprise, church, and hope. So when the government decides, sir, to absorb part of the increase in electricity costs, when it cushions fuel prices, when it blunts the freight costs that would otherwise drive up prices on the supermarket shelf, when it expands the reverse tax credit, broadens the compensatory income tax credit, lifts the pensioner taxable allowance, and provides direct support to pensioners, sir, who are on a fixed income, increase welfare recipients and persons with special needs, it is doing more than economic management, sir. It is protecting a way of life, our way of life, and providing a better life for our people. It is making sure that Barbadian households are not thrown so violently off balance and that the ordinary rhythms of life do not start to break down. It is making sure that the worker can still get to work. It is making sure that the family can still buy groceries. It is making sure that the elder can still stretch a fixed income. It is making sure that the home can still keep the light on without becoming the dominant mode of the month. And that, Mr. President, sir, is culture too. That is a deeper cultural meaning of this bill. Because a people protected at the pump, a people protected from rising light bills, a people protected at the supermarket, and a people protected in their golden years is a people given the dignity to remain themselves. And that is not a small thing, sir. That is governance with a soul. Sir, I now want to turn on to the work that the Division of Youth Affairs has done over the past year. And I want to focus on two main departments because we don't have much time. The Youth Advance Score. Sir, oh my God, get two hours late. My independent opposition senator. Sir, the Youth Advance Score, we had over 400 persons graduate from this initiative over the last year. And well, sir, that's commendable. We are ramping up that to 1,000 this year because too many young persons in this country have lost hope. Too many of our young persons need opportunity. And the Youth Advance Score presents that opportunity, especially for those, sir, who may have left school without certificates or skills training, sir, who may have left school with this training, but still need some form of discipline and moral advancement, sir. So that the Youth Advance Score is going to, as I said, we are going to ramp up to at least 1,000 students in the next year. Next week, we have the opening of the new home in Paragon. And sir, this is going to be the future for many of those quote-unquote at-risk youth. And sir, the Block Transformation Unit, over 1,500 young people were engaged over the last year by the Block Transformation Unit and through Project Dawn. Sir, regardless of if it was hairdressing, nail technicians, learning to drive a bobcat, sir, going to Polytechnic, going to the community college, or even getting a weed whacker to help your community. The Block Transformation Unit directly impacted young people from St. Lucie to St. Philip and from St. James to St. John, sir. And sir, the last project, which is now under the Division of Youth, is the one that is so dear to me, and that is the Prime Minister's Cup. And sir, this tournament is something phenomenal. We have had over 25 young persons had the opportunity to go overseas and to play football. And sir, that is by no means a small feat. We have had communities engaged. We have had vendors enfranchised. We have been able to visit and to go to the length and breadth of this country and to develop also football fields so that when persons in the community want something to do, when a young person wants to go and play football, train or whatever, they have the opportunity to do so, sir. And then, Mr. President, I want to speak about what the government is doing over the next financial year. We spoke about the Youth Advance Score, but also we can speak about the Global Young Bajans Fund. We see continue ramping up in the Secondary School Students International Exposure Initiative. We see it in the SOMOS program and the exposure being created through Panama and the wider regional connection. We see it in the strengthening of digital skills training. We see it in the effort to make participation in service uniform, cultural, or sporting activity part of the lived educational experience. We see it in the Barbados Republic Child Wealth Fund, which says to every child born here that this republic intends to back your future in a material way. But Mr. President, beyond these flagship initiatives, we are not stopping there. In this new financial year, the Division of Youth and Culture will move with purpose, urgency, clarity, and intent. Sir, for our young content creators, we plan to establish a digital export clearing facility because our young people must not only create in Barbados, they must earn from the world. Sir, this will open doors that were never opened before. And I know the independent senator and I sat on the board of the BCSA. We were trying to do this for quite some time. And while we may not be able to get direct payments in currently, we must create a workaround for our young people in this nation to really create a better life for our people. Sir, youth in agriculture. You would have heard the Prime Minister during the election speak about allocating 100 acres of land for development for young persons in agriculture. We are very cognizant we may not get 100 acres all one time, but we are starting, sir. And placing lands in the hands of those under 40, supported by roads, water, and electricity, will now give persons the opportunity to grow from the soil up. If we are really going to create a food processing hub in this nation, if we are really going to lower our food import bill, sir, we must start somewhere. So the allocation of these lands, and it will not just be a plain allocation, you will have to go to do training. There's a whole institute at St. Lucie, sir, where persons will be required to go to get some type of formal training so that this program can become a reality. And sir, a revision of the youth entrepreneurship scheme. We have to move from idea to enterprise, turning ambition into structure and structure into a sustainable business, sir. And I hope it is our intention to work alongside and with the Barbados Trust Loan Fund and Fund Access, because there must be a direct pipeline and pathways for young persons to grow their businesses, not only the technical support that the YES will provide, but the financial support that is done by the youth, by the Trust Loan Fund, which this government raised from $10,000, sir, to $20,000. That is a very strong feat, sir. And then there's a Barbados Youth Talent Network. This is connecting skills to opportunity and potential to placement in one unified national system. What is this? Sir, this is what I call the government's cadet corps, because if we really want to give young persons the opportunity, we must provide the gateways and the opportunities for them to come and register their skills, whether you are interested in climate change or you're interested in the road networks or water networks or engineering. You can register you could sign up and register on the website, put in your skills, put in your qualifications and what interests that you have, so that when we need placement on boards, when we need a research paper done, when we need some form of body formed for an initiative that we are planning to execute, we must be able to pull from this network, sir. So this is a very strong feat for young persons. This is opening the doors for young people in government. And sir, the Bridging the Gap Youth Summit. This is a summit which will be chaired by the Prime Minister. And this is where policy will meet reality. And young voices shape the national direction of Barbados. Sir, this is not about just young persons coming and taking photographs. This is about removing the red tape, about giving young persons the opportunity to speak fearlessly and to speak directly with those where the power lies. And sir, there's the Entertainment Commission, which we intend to put into operation. I know Senator Walters will pay very close attention because he's deeply involved in entertainment. And sir, the Entertainment Commission will be a one-stop engine to unlock the full economic power of our creatives and position culture as a real industry. Sir, what this entertainment will be is, as I said, a one-stop shop. So you don't have, as a promoter, and I know Senator Ford knows this also well, as a promoter, you have to go many different places to get approval from this body, approval from that body. And we know so well in this industry what entertainment provides for our GDP, how entertainment complements tourism, sir. So it'd be remiss of me to stand here after working so long in the entertainment industry and not to put forward the ideas to have an entertainment commission. Mr. President, these initiatives are not abstract. They are deliberate, they are practical, but more importantly, they are necessary. Because we cannot tell a young person to dream and then give them no structure to build. We cannot speak of potential and then leave it without pathways. We cannot call this a youth bill without building a youth economy. And that, Mr. President, is exactly what we are doing. And when the government looks honestly at the fact that far too many workers still lack some of the digital skills required for the modern economy, and then responds not with hiring in, but with training, with investment, and institutional partnership, that is not panic, sir. That is progress. And sir, if this is not a youth bill, then words have lost their meaning. Mr. President, this is where the bill before us intersects so powerfully with the word of culture and youth. Because beyond the direct measures in the financial statement, the work already being shaped within youth and culture matters deeply to me. And sir, permit me a few moments here to tell you why it matters to me. Sir, as a young person, I know, and Senator Trim and I would have sat on some committees together, sir, as young people. And you know, everybody wants young people, Senator Slocum and I as well. Everybody wants young persons, but oftentimes they don't want to listen to young people. They just want you there as a backdrop, as tokenism, as the Honourable member is saying. So, sir, I know what it feels to be a young person in rooms. I know how it feels to be a young person in rooms that they don't take you on. But at the same token, I know what it feels to be a young person and have the support not only of a Prime Minister, luckily for me, but also of the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union, who, sir, believes that we will rise or fall on principle. And sir, that has been instilled in me through not only the General Secretary, but my father and other mentors in my life. And sir, culture means a lot to me as well. When it was 24, 25, I had the opportunity to operate a lounge in St. Lawrence Gap. And sir, that gave me the exposure, that gave me the experience to work alongside our carpenters, work alongside our bartenders, work alongside our cultural practitioners, sir, everyone in the industry. And notwithstanding that at the lounge, sir, I then went on to work in the creative sector as a producer of some of the major shows in this island, sir. Sir, this allowed me to rub shoulders with all types of persons, regardless if you are a vendor, a plumber, an electrician, sir, all types of people. And a lot of time people only see shows and see who's performing and so on, but it's those that in the background, those that make things happen, that really put forward and really shows us how things can be produced. And sir, the portfolio on youth and culture, which I have the absolute pleasure of privilege to lead, is not ornamental, it is nation shaping. And that is why I want to speak plainly about our youth commissioners. If we are serious about youth commissioners, they cannot be invisible appointments. They cannot be titles handed out and then forgotten. They must be visible. They must be active. They must be accountable. They must be community anchors. They must be organizers, mentors, mobilizers, and connectors between national policy and neighborhood life. They must be seen, measured, but more importantly, sir, they must matter to us all. Sir, the Bridging the Gap Youth Summit, likewise, must not become another event where young people are photographed and then forgotten. It must be a serious working space where lived realities of young people meet the machinery of government, where barriers are named honestly with straight talk, where opportunity is visible, and where outcomes follow conversation. Sir, young people do not need speeches about possibility. We need pathways. We need structure. We need systems. We need doors that actually open. And if they are hard to open, sir, we need somebody that is strong enough to kick them open, sir. Mr. President, the same is true about culture. We have for too long spoken about culture as though it is only viable when it is ceremonial, decorative, or seasonal. But culture is economic power. Culture is soft power. Culture is healing power. Culture is strategic power, sir. And that is why the direct cultural provisions in this bill matter so much to me. Sir, the emerging film framework is not a side note. It is a signal. It says that Barbados understands that in the modern world, stories travel, images sell, identity markets, and culture can generate jobs, skills, investment, and foreign exchange, sir. When productions can access structured rebates tied to real local expenditure, and when top-ups are attached to Barbadian practitioners and Barbadian culture contributors, sir, government is making a simple but a powerful point. If Barbados is the host production, Barbados must share in the prosperity, sir. Sir, this is not about glamour. This is about jobs. This is about training. This is about branding. It is about local procurement. It is about people becoming participants, sir, and not spectators. And sir, even before the full framework is operationalized, we are already seeing movement in that direction. The pipeline is forming, the possibility is becoming concrete, sir, and the vision is beginning to take administrative shape. Then, sir, there is a proposed Barbados Film Festival. That matters also, sir, because a film festival is not just an event. If this is properly conceived of, it is a statement that says Barbados is not content to consume global culture only. Barbados intends to produce, host, curate, and export culture as well. It says that our stories have values. It says that our creators have market power. It says that our island is not merely a backdrop, sir, it is a source. And when you place that alongside the digital skills agenda, the retraining effort, the expansion of approved training institutions, sir, and the wider project of preparing Barbados for a greener and more technologically advanced economy, what begins to emerge is something larger than policy silos. Mr. President, imagine the young Barbadian from Northumberland in St. Lucie who believes and loves stories but has never seen storytelling as a profession. Imagine the young student in Glebe, St. George who understands editing, design, sound, animation, writing, performance, fashion, lighting, or visual composition, but has been taught to treat this gift as a hobby to apologize for. Imagine that young person hearing perhaps for the first time that the country is building an ecosystem in which that gift may become work, livelihood, pride, and contribution, sir. That is what this bill begins to do. It transforms imagination into reality. It transforms talent into industry. It transforms possibility, sir, into policy. And that is why I say again that this is a youth and culture bill, not only in the direct sense, sir, but in the deeper sense of the bill. And of course, sir, I could not speak about culture without speaking about Cropover. Sir, I have hit the ground running. No, we ain't got it done. Over the last few days, sir, I've had the pleasure of going to about 3 or 4 band launches. So we are definitely in the season for Cropover. And I had the pleasure to be invited to the Honourable Members band launch as well. Sir, I've been in Sir, I've been in conversation with the stakeholders, practitioners, and players across the cultural sector, listening, engaging, and moving with urgency for what matters most. And so, sir, I am proud to announce today the return of the soca monarch. Yes, Mr. President, the soca monarch is returning, and it's coming back with force. it is coming back with excitement. And it is coming back with a top price similar to that of the pick of the crop, sir. Because our young people and our young entertainers, regardless of if they're singing traditional soca, bashment soca, what party soca, whatever it is, they must see the opportunity that those before us had. We see so many of our entertainers, Lil Rich, remember they call him Lil Rich, Alison Hines, all of them who would have benefited, sir, from having a soca monarch. And I don't know if my honourable member would be joining. I don't know if you could sing now for something else, but I hope that I could see it there. Sir, this is about energy. This is about opportunity. This is about giving our artists, our writers, our performers, and our people something big to rally around, sir. And Mr. President, sir, I must address a matter that has been on the lips of many Barbadians in recent weeks, and one that falls squarely within my portfolio. Sir, the conversation about Carifesta has been loud, it has at times been heated, and in some quarters deliberately shallow. There were public calls for the figures. Sir, those figures have now been laid bare. You saw it plastered all over the media a few days ago, sir. That is what transparency that Senator Waters asked for looks like. But transparency must not end, but it ain't gonna change you, okay? But transparency, sir, transparency, sir, must not come just at a number, sir. It must extend to context, to scale, and to outcome. Because, Mr. President, Carifesta in 2025 cannot be reduced to just a line item. It must be understood as an intervention. This country made a deliberate choice to reimagine Carifesta, not only as a 10-day cultural display, but as a national economic engine. And the results are not abstract, sir. Approximately $138 million from our internal auditing showed us that a multiplier effect has generated over $138 million, sir. Sir, over 8,000 Barbadians directly engaged. Over 340 vendors activated with over $1.5 million in artisan sales, a creative sector which suffocated and suffered in the aftermath of COVID, sir, now given the oxygen to breathe again. This is real money, sir, in real pockets. It trained over 300 technical professionals, sir. It delivered permanent infrastructure, such as the Richard Stout Amphitheatre, the Carifesta Village, and our Newton Performing Arts Centre. It opened digital export pathways for our Barbadian and creatives through platforms like Carry Shopper, sir. So when they ask what Carifesta did, this is what it did. And when we speak about Carifesta, we are not only speaking about cost. Senator Sinclair made it clear yesterday, we are speaking about value. We are speaking about jobs, skills, enterprise, foreign exchange, and ultimately, sir, confidence. Confidence that Barbados is not merely a consumer of culture, but a producer, an exporter, and a serious global player. Now, Mr. President, there are those who prefer to collapse this entire exercise into a narrow debate about what was budgeted versus what was spent. That is their choice. But it is a myopic one, because it refuses to weigh what was achieved against what was invested. Sir, that does not mean ignoring the final cost. It means refusing to discuss it without perspective. And let us also be clear on another point. The accounting for an undertaking of an event of this scale, it was never going to be a simple exercise. Thousands of invoices, thousands of payments, including Senator Slocum's one. Vendors submitting late, I hope you were not one of them. Others requiring correction and resubmission. Sir, in that environment, the responsible course was not to rush out to a so-called final figure that was not yet final, sir. It was to allow the process to mature, to ensure that when the country was given a figure, that one could stand up to scrutiny. And sir, while we are here, Mr. President, let us put something on the record. Carifesta 2017 put on by the then Democratic Labour Party government paled in comparison. That is not a boast, that is not exaggeration, that is the lived reality. In 2020, I can tell you how. In 2025, Barbados built out a Carifesta village in Carifesta House. What happened in 2017? And supported infrastructure that will serve this country for decades to come. What we created was structured, it was in the car part, yeah, was structured, deliberate, and designed for economic return, sir. In 2017, much of that activity was confined to one car park. There was cultural expression, yes, but sir, without some skill, without some organization, without the same organization, and without the same economic activation, sir, we can speak about Carifesta in 1981, sir, where we can see the legacy, the now-built NCF at West Terrace.
That's right.
That is the legacy of the last Labour Party government at that in 1981.
That's correct.
And to this day, Mr. President, you know what is funny? You want to know what's funny? There has been no comprehensive accounting placed before the Barbadian public for that 2017 exercise. No full picture, no complete reckoning. So the fella that in Christchurch that were about for the list they get on February 11th, tell you gonna find them here. Today, this government that is being asked to defend transparency, sir, after placing every single figure on the table. The question, sir, cannot just be about cost. It must be about value. It must be about outcomes. And it must be about honesty in how we assess both, sir. So, sir, I ask, do we prefer modesty without return or ambition without impact? Do we prefer when our creatives struggle quietly or when they earn visibly, sir? Do we prefer when opportunity is left to chance or when it is built by design? Because this government has made a choice. We chose to invest in our people. We chose to activate our creative economy, sir. We chose to ensure that Barbados, in a post-COVID world, did not retreat, did not surrender, in the words of our president, sir, but we advanced. And for that, Mr. President, Carifesta was not only justified, it was necessary. Mr. President, I also want to say a word about unity. Because youth policy, youth policy, I get enough with it, let me. Youth policy and cultural policy cannot flourish in a climate of permanent bitterness. We will disagree in public life, that is normal. We will debate, that is healthy. We will contest ideas, that is necessary, sir. But sir, Barbados must get to the stage where we can agree to disagree without being disagreeable. That is not weakness, sir. That is maturity. And to our young people, and allow me to digress for a moment, sir, to say especially to our young men, emotional intelligence is not weakness. It is our strength under control. You don't have to pick up a gun. Too many of our young men still feel pressure to prove manhood by rage, by recklessness and dominance, or the inability to simply walk away, sir. But true manhood is not found in how loudly a gun can sound or how loudly we react, but is found in how wisely you respond. Restraint is strength, sir. Self-command is strength. Discernment is also strength, sir. And Mr. President, if we are honest, that lesson is not only for our young men on the block, as a society likes to say, it's also for politics. Sir, when I read some of the opposing views on this all-encompassing bill, and no, I said some, not all, I had to shake my head. We cannot ask young people to master their emotions while we in public life model emotional indiscipline. We cannot ask the youth to de-escalate when we perform outrage and feel outrage as a habit. We cannot call for maturity in the country and then indulge in political pettiness for political points. Young people are watching us, sir. They are learning from how we disagree. They are learning from how we handle power. They are learning from how we carry ourselves when we are crossed. So let there be a call, not only to young men in communities, but to all of us, especially younger politicians and emerging leaders, to show the emotional intelligence worthy of public life. Let us recruit a better political culture by living a better political culture. Mr. President, my appeal, therefore, is not to one party, one age group, or one social class. My appeal is to Barbados. So, sir, the teacher who still pours into children, the coach who still turns up, to the parent holding a family together under pressure, to the cultural worker trying to create with dignity, to the young person looking for a door to open, to the elderly person who simply wants to live with some peace of mind, and to the community elder who still believes Barbados can be better than its worst moments. This bill speaks to them. And it speaks to them because it understands something fundamental. A society is held together not held together only by statistics alone. It is held together by whether people feel protected, whether they feel seen, whether people feel that the future is being built with them in mind. Mr. President, I close by returning to where I began. I began with gratitude. I began with responsibility. I began with awareness that making a contribution in this honorable chamber is both a privilege and also a test. I have not come here to occupy a seat, sir. Those who know me well know that I am not interested in the political glitz and glamour. I came here, sir, to make a contribution. Equally, I have not come here merely to praise this appropriation bill. I come here to defend for what this appropriation bill represents. It is people-centered. It is future-minded. It is serious about youth development. It is serious about cultural preservation. It protects the Barbadian way of life while preparing the next generation to extend it. This bill does not only spend, it shields. It does not only react, it prepares. It does not only manage numbers, sir, it protects a nation's character while investing in its future. And for those reasons, sir, I commend the Appropriation Bill 2026 to this honorable chamber and to the country of Barbados. And I hail it for what it is, a people's bill, a youth-conscious bill, a culture-conscious bill, a bill determined to preserve the soul of Barbados while building the future of Barbados. And sir, I will end on the words of our young Barbadian dancehall artist, Doja. I am not perfect, sir, but I am doing my best, and I will do my best. Mrs. President, I'm obliged.
Thank you very much, Senator, the Honourable Shane Archer. Senator Ramon Ali.
Mr. President, my fellow colleagues, I, like many of them, have to indicate that I'm new to this chamber. My friend, Senator Archer, didn't include me in the youth, but I did not take it personally. But like them, I understand that the nature of this responsibility is a heavy one, and that in the circumstances of seeking to meet the requirements of that responsibility, there is a need to exercise solid consideration, ensure that your contributions are balanced and fair, and above all, truthful in your discourse to the people of Barbados. Our decisions here impact the daily lives of all our citizens, and that weight dictates that I undertake this duty in a manner that recognizes that the work in this chamber is important in terms of this administration being able to exercise the mandate that it has recently been given. Mr. President, you will learn over time I am not a person inclined to use 10 words when 4 will do. So it is unlikely that you will have to remind me about time, and I don't imagine you will have to remind me today. But I will also take some guidance from my youth and guidance from good Senator Ford and start with an area to which I am well acquainted, and that is the Sanitation Service Authority. It's not a sexy subject. It's not a subject that allows me to throw a few darts where they should land, but it is a subject that impacts the day-to-day lives of every Barbadian. And I speak to the Sanitation Authority with a certain regard and a certain knowledge base, because I have had the privilege to now be in my second iteration as chairman of that authority. I was chairman in the first decade of this century, and I understand what this administration left, and I understand what this administration came back and found. The Sanitation Authority is an institution at the center of public health, community dignity, and the environment. And it is appropriate that we've gone back home to the leader of government businesses ministry, because that's where we belong. It belongs in the Ministry of Health, and it is at the forefront of the public health of this nation. When it works, it is invisible. I don't hear a word. When it doesn't work, it impacts every one of us. It's on the front page of the nation, and everyone is talking about when they last got a pickup. So we have to understand, and this government understands, that we must view the authority's functioning as a core responsibility to the well-being of this nation. And I will brag a little. And I'm not bragging just for me, Mr. President. I'm bragging for the people and the workers of the Sanitation Authority, and I want to put it on record now. The workers of the Sanitation Authority do not get the regard and the respect that they deserve. When my senator colleague, Senator Niles, spoke about the Defense Force, I thought of the workers of the sanitation who are often up when most of us are in bed. They work through the sun, they work through the rain. They do a job that many of us would not deign to do. And we do not give them the respect and the regard that their position demands in terms of the public health of this country. And when I say I brag because when I left it near the end of first decade in this country, the Sanitation Authority was functioning. There was on-time pickups, there was a revamped finance department, there was a revamped maintenance department. The authority was doing the job dictated by its mandate. I also speak as the present chair who came back to find an authority decimated to its core. So that when Barbadians rightfully complained about issues with sanitation within the last 2 or 3 years, they do not recognize that those issues had their nucleus 8 to 10 years previously. That's the nucleus. We often hear about the lost decade, and persons say, well, why does this administration still talk about the lost decade? You've been in for 8 years. Now you're pulling back up on history. Well, the reality is that the lost decade relative to mismanagement, lack of maintenance, means that this administration had to pick back up. Like my senator friend, Honourable, she learned of her limitations in the music. I learned of my limitations on the track field. You know, I unfortunately fall into that age group that sticks me in 2 divisions, and I lined up with these chaps who were all older than me and decided I was running an 800. First 400, I was doing pretty well. It was with them. And I thought, well, oh, this is easier than I thought. The next 100, I started to drop back because they didn't reduce speed, and I realized I'm reducing speed. And the reality is that if I was to have any chance of picking back up, the amount of exertion, energy that would have been required would have meant I had no chance. This is the position that I found when I returned to the Sanitation Service Authority. The authority requires in the region of 36 vehicles to function. Base requirements as daily availability. I came back and found 12. And in that 12 were vehicles that I had bought 15 plus years previously. That is the sort of problem that this administration had to fix and move forward to in a position where today, I can say that when I checked my last statistics, 95% of this entire nation had its garbage picked up on time with a weekly schedule that was meeting the promises that we had made. And the 5% that didn't related not to issues of truck availability, but to matters such as weather, localized access, and of that nature. And the plan is, the promise to the nation is that this has to be 100% every day. Because the reality is, the delivery of their service is very simple. Have I had my pickup? Was it on time? Once that is done, persons are not concerned. And the type of investment that the government had to make in the Sanitation Authority to pick up that extra 100 or 200 meters was substantial. Senator Connell would have asked yesterday about the difference in the bill in terms of expenditure for the Ministry of Health. And as I said, we've returned there. But if you wish to speak to what is good management, if you wish to speak to what is effective management of your resources, not wastage, you have to recognize that the subvention for the Sanitation Service Authority was set in 2018 with the GSC levy, garbage sewage levy, and has never increased. This is now 8 years later, and we are operating on the same amount of money that was set in 2018. And I don't know that there are many ministries or programs that can say that in the context of their operations. The fact is that to do that catch up, and when I say catch up, let's put it again in context of numbers. I came in and found 12 vehicles. Over the last 8 years, we have had to purchase 55 compactor trucks. That is the energy required in terms of a catch-up, and there's no way that the Sanitation Authority was going to be able to do that on the basis of that subvention. And that is why we required central government help in the terms of the acquisition of those types of resources. Resources once for the collection, resources for the landfill and the like. And when I put it on the record as to my regard and concern, respect due the workers of the authority, government in recognizing that obligation has implemented changes and benefits that reflect the manner in which those workers should be treated. They now have health insurance, a group health policy, a basic requirement for many, but an important one for sanitation workers. The rollout bin program, which required 120,000 bins being distributed across this island, was not easy. It was a logistical nightmare. But it certainly has meant that this country is a more pleasing environment. We no longer have bins not fit for purpose left at the side of the road. But it wasn't only about the environment, it was also about the workers who had to pick up bins not fit for purpose, laden with water because they had no covers, putting their health in jeopardy as they carried out the base obligations of the authority. So the bin rollout was about the beauty of this country, the bin rollout was about the health of the workers. That is how you take care of critical service providers. The incentive program that has paid out over 1.6 million to those workers relative and tied to productivity. Senator Walters is a businessman. He understands the concepts of productivity. And when this government says that it plans to link performance within the public sectors by reference to production, it was scoffed at, civil servants and production. Well, no. Sanitation Service Authority represents an area where productivity can be measured, again, because of an investment in technology that never existed before. When a citizen calls in and says, I did not receive a pickup, we can check to see if their bin was tipped. We can see when it was last tipped. We can see if it's a fair report or is it a situation, as occurs on occasion, where our men will go on Christmas Eve and do a pickup, and persons load up their garbage on Christmas Day, as will occur, and then the next day give a call and say, I ain't get picked up in a week. What happened? The garbage out here full. So the reality is, we have now put ourselves in a position where we can test productivity, match it in terms of reward to these workers. We have put things in place to safeguard their well-being, necessary investments in their well-being. And these estimates represent a continuation of that process because, again, they speak to even further technological improvements, whereby we can say to a particular citizen and individual, this is the day. I would like to get to the point where we can say this is the time, but we can get to a point where they will say this is the day you are going to get your pickup. When there's a hiccup for whatever reason, there's a communication across the land saying this is the reason for that hiccup, this is what we're going to do to fix it, and this is when you can expect a correction. The authority works and works well once it has been resourced. And the problem that we have faced within the last few years that the authority was not resourced. And it was not a problem of resources within those years, but a problem of resources 10, 12 years ago. And I need the people of the land to understand that. There's a reason why you do not see us in the paper anymore, and I'm glad we're not in the paper anymore. That's what we wish to be the case. But we need to understand what the lost decade actually means and how it has affected different areas. When Senator Walters talks about schools needing to be rebuilt, he has to ask himself, is this a school that needs to be rebuilt because it was not maintained when it should have been? We know what happens to our housing, our buildings when they're not used, when they're not maintained, when they're just left to stand. And again, when we are now fixing the problem, when we are now dealing with it, do not act as if the nucleus happened yesterday. It did not. It did not occur yesterday. So in terms of looking at these estimates and looking at the measures that the government is obligated to put in place and looking at the expenditure, because we hear about the expenditure. We hear how high the expenditure is. Again, my good friend, the senator, is a man of business. And I understood yesterday he was talking about the increase in expenditure and how it's racing. But basic accounts will tell us we need to look at both sides. And he didn't talk about the increase in income and that the expenditure is matched to an income that has increased exponentially. So that we can use statistics to prove any point in the land, but I think a statistic that has been highlighted in the other place and by our venerable Prime Minister is the fact of where our GDP to debt ratio now stands. which is the perfect comparison of expenditure to income. So let's not be misled, sent off the inappropriate path when we make our assessments of the numbers within this appropriations bill. But let me get back to where I should be. But I just felt the need to make that cross-reference. When the Sanitation Service Authority looks to the future, and as I said, we want to get to the place where, with a click of a button, our citizens can know how dependable this service is. Our citizens can access the necessary information. We are looking to improve route efficiency because we have mapped out all of the routes that exist in Barbados, and we want to make it the most efficient route run. We are attacking the operations in a manner with the technology that is available. And I understand that this element is as important to mission transformation as any of the other elements raised in here and in the other place, because that is a critical service, a service which goes to the core of our public health, a service which goes to the core of community regard. It is a service that we need to put the necessary investments in, and this government, through the changes and the implementations in this appropriations bill, have done it. I'm not saying that there are no issues. One of the nagging issues facing the authority is the management, the proper management of the mangrove landfill. We have improved markedly over past practices and occurrences. As they would say, knock on wood, we have not seen a fire emanating from that landfill in recent time because of the implementation of certain safety protocols. But the reality is that the space is running out. The reality is that if we do not improve our management, improve the manner in which we deal with our refuse disposal, we will have a continuing problem in that area. And there are certain projects, as highlighted by the leader of government business, emanating from when she was in a different place. That is the Ministry of Energy. And there are consolidations of efforts which would mean that the management of our waste disposal will improve. But ensuring that there's a limitation of odor and the like is not an easy job. Legislation has to be introduced that deals with the issues of offal, dead carcasses, and the like, which are delivered to the mangrove landfill, which should not be delivered to the mangrove landfill. So when you're driving along the ABC highway and you get hit with a smell, most persons would, that's the dump. Quite often it's not the dump. There are other facilities up in the mangrove area that make a major contribution to odor and how it travels in that corridor. So there's more work to be done, but I cannot say that over the past 6 to 8 years, in terms of the investment, in terms of the provisions that have been set forth in this appropriations bill, in terms of the move back to the Ministry of Health, that this government doesn't recognize the import and is doing what is necessary in that area. Now, I also rise, Mr. President, to speak on the Ministry of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs and Criminal Justice. Ministry is tasked with the overriding obligations to maintain order, preserve public confidence in the rule of law. And in the context of the average Barbadian, those words really at this time only speak to one issue, and that is crime and its impact on the population. this administration recognized that crime is not going to be attacked and dealt with by slogans. It's not secured by a single institution. It's not secured by a single policy or a single budget line in this bill. It is dealt with by the laws, combined with the institutions, combined with the resources, combined with the community, and a national effort and willingness to attack it at its core. When this government assumed office, the criminal justice system was burdened by structural weaknesses, lengthy case backlogs. There isn't anyone in this country who has any connection with the court system who won't mourn or recognize the nature of court backlog. Outdated laws, too few judges and prosecutors, and limited investigative tools. Those are resource issues. Those are actually the easiest of the issues to address in the context of fighting crime. Easiest in the form as you can recognize what is the problem. You can literally throw money at those types of problems and they will be improved. So we did that. The courts were strengthened. The number of judges hearing criminal matters was increased. Prosecutors were doubled. The procedural delays were attacked. Plea bargaining legislation was put in place. A new bail act was put forward to address repeat offending and protect public safety. And we had mandatory minimum sentences for firearm offenses. Again, those are the simple matters. But that collective work, that collective job that Hayam references needs all parties. And when I look at the role of the judiciary here, it is critical. And we need to remember that sentencing is a balance between protecting the rights and the justice of the circumstance and also protecting society at large. Now, Senator Malaloom would have made certain references to his support for the death sentence. And I've always understood that the issue of death sentence, especially at a parliamentary level, was a matter of conscience. And members were generally left with the right to deal with that type of issue as a matter of conscience. And I make no comment on it. But I want to look at what I see the judiciary doing presently, and I want to commend the efforts that is carried forward by our judges. Recently, we would have seen a 42-year sentence prescribed for a convicted felon relating to a heinous murder. And I thought it quite appropriate in the context that it was balancing the nature and the elements of the crime that was committed while sending a message to the populace and also seeking to protect the population at large from a person who obviously the judicial officer felt showed no elements that there was a possibility of rehabilitation. That is appropriate judicial action. And that is a role that our judiciary has started to play, and I commend them in that regard. But I talked about throwing the money at it. I talked about the role of the judiciary. I talked about all the legislation that we pass, and we all know that those elements together will not fix the problem. It's bigger than that. And during this sitting, Mr. President, I have heard substantive contributions which speak to the role of sport, Senator King, the role of culture, Senator Slocum, the role of mentorship, Senator Ford, and I commend all of them because they're all correct. Those are three elements put together which will work at the core issues of trying to attack an insidious type of failing within this society that cuts all of us. But the money poured at it can be judged within the estimates. Reference was made, and sometimes we fail to take care of the simple as we look to new endeavors. So I would have heard Senator Walters speak of the need to expand and look at the ports of entries and what new methodologies we can deploy. And I have no problems with that. But when you remember that we didn't even have the basics running, and that is proper scanners, non-working scanners, obsolete scanners, you have to take care of the simple basics and understand this. Similar to the point I just made about what has happened before. Once a gun gets here, it ain't disappearing. Guns that came in here 8 years ago, they ain't gone. They're still here. They might change hands. They might get sale moved around, but it's still here. So we have to take care of the basics before we move to the next steps. I would say these estimates are moving to the next steps because these estimates and government action has spoken to a change, a recognition of the change of the playing field. There was recently interception of communication legislation that was enacted. We all sit and watch TV and we see these crime shows and you see police being able to effect capture of criminals utilizing tools that our legislation did not support. You have to start again with your improvement of your legislative body. If you don't deal with it, then all those tools are wastage because someone who's trained like me will get in court and ask you how you put in that evidence there, where it come from. That can't be used. So if you don't start with the legislative framework, you are not in a position to effect the necessary steps when you get in the courtroom. My friend, Senator Trim, would have talked about the National Crime Prevention Program. And the National Crime Prevention Program recognizes that crime does not start with a charge sheet. Crime starts in the community, it starts in the homes, it starts on the streets, it starts with individuals who in their mind have no option. We may disagree. I have stories, clear stories. One of my employees, and I promise Senator Walters, this is not an attack. One of my, I give it the precursor. One of my employees remarked to me about having what he considered to be a very good job with a friend at the Barbados Water Authority. He then suffered redundancy back in 1991, 92 in relation to the cutback in the civil service, 8% cut and the like. He said he went out, and although he thought it was possibly beneath him, he went into security. He did anything to make $1. And this is what most of us here would do. But he said he had a colleague who, when he went out, asked himself, that isn't what I should be earning. And he chose a different pathway. He chose the pathway of crime. Now, there's no right, But we will be fooling ourselves if we recognize that if we don't address issues such as unemployment, direction for young people, livable wages for my friend in labor, we are not attacking the issue at its core. So that story accords with hers of that chap who had meaningful employment, was doing well, and when he lost his job, where did he find himself? These are the facts that we need to take in consideration when we are crafting any meaningful crime prevention strategy. So when you look at these estimates, Mr. President, you will see an investment at subprogram 263, $1,500,000 in funds that are the forefront of social change and interaction. The government recognizes that without the allies in the NGOs, the church, we cannot win this fight. So that you need to put the money in the community in the hands of the persons who are on the front lines if you are to make the necessary impact. Focus cannot only be on the police. Community engagement is critical. So what does that money do? And I think the question was asked here, what does that money do? Where is it going? What is the purpose? Is it a proper investment? Well, some of that money goes to neighborhood watch programs. Again, persons who are on the front line in terms of protecting their little community, doing what is necessary to ensure that my neighbor and I, two neighbors, that we good. We've also heard in the papers, and Barbadians have been particularly concerned when they hear of an individual who has been charged with murder out on bail, and then you hear they got involved in some subsequent activity. How could that happen? Why should it happen? Well, here we are applying money to post-charge strategies, monitoring repeating offenders. And the reality is that the justice system may well say that under these rules, a chap is entitled to bail. And I have no problems with the bail. Again, maybe because of my training, I think differently to the average Barbadian. But I still do recognize that when an individual has shown a propensity for certain behavior, we cannot willy-nilly let them out onto the street without some question as to how we are going to control that behavior. So that is where we are putting investment as part of this sub-program. Firearm investigations and forensic capabilities, it is, and I'll come later to the amount that is now being put to the FSC, the Forensic Center, but for any number of reasons well beyond the administration, well beyond any political party, our forensics department has not been operating in the manner that it should. It means that our police officers have been hamstrung, our prosecutors have been hamstrung in the manner in which they can attack criminal activity. That ends today. That ends with the nature of, again, of a subvention to bring that facility back into full working order. The idea of DNA, being able to check the science, being able to do the types of analysis which we all hear and see, but has not been part and parcel of prosecutions in this country, that ends today. And I commend the government in relation to making sure that that is a priority under this appropriation bill. Going back to a previous theme, I have said that we can't start with a charge sheet. That means we are spending money on school liaison. We are spending money on youth outreach and intervention. King's Trust program, which is a preventative intervention aimed at steering young individuals away from firearm-related activity. There are a number of initiatives which show clearly that this government recognizes this is a full-on war. This is a war that cannot be fought on any one front. It doesn't just require money, it requires social program support. And today we have heard, and multiple senators have referenced this, when I speak of full-on support, I want Barbadians to recognize that each of them play a role in this manner. It is appropriate to ask, what is the government doing? I have no problems with the question, because at the end of the day, the government owes an obligation to lead by example, lead by investment, lead by legislation, lead by policies. But we are fooling ourselves if we believe that the government by itself can attack a problem such as crime and violence. Every one of us have an obligation to approach the matter in the manner in which we cry about it. It might only be me, and I may be somewhat biased, but I see the news, I see the social media, I see, and let me say, a man is innocent until convicted, and I live by that, being an attorney at law. But I know that the way I feel when I see a post of some chap charged with murder or charged with some aggravated robbery walking into our courts, and there are people clapping and shouting and waving in the background and signs being put up, that bothers me. I have to ask, what is it? What is the message being sent by the community to these individuals in terms of their activity, what they're there for, what is happening? And we need to ask ourselves, aren't we encouraging them in the end? They are not heroes. They are not heroes. They're hailed like Rihanna lying down and people shouting and waving. So, yes, what is the government doing? But what are you doing? What are we as the individuals doing to ensure that we attack this problem and attack it in a meaningful way? So when government invests in the Pleon Foundation, Skills for Life for the Development Project, providing youth with a 6-month youth development and workforce readiness, Supreme Counseling, 12-week youth development and leadership program for boys called Boys on the Rise, Empowering BIM Youth. There are programs set out within these appropriation bills that attacks the issue of crime on multi-levels. It's a macro activity. Not to mention the money put for the police and law enforcement in the context, $200 million in the nature of increasing the force, giving them the resources that are necessary. I have no issues with this document in terms of the support that it has given across the number of elements that are required to receive support. But I ask the people to join in that effort. Understand that this is not a fight won by any one individual, one institution, one person, one policy. Sometimes we hear, and quite rightfully, they're only going after the small man. We're the big boys. I think we need to recognize that the big boys aren't in the street. The big boys ain't gonna be indulging in the gang shootout and warfare. They may be funding it. They may be receiving the proceeds from it, but they aren't on the ground facing the consequences of it. So when you see an investment within the appropriations bill in the financial investigations unit, when you see the government passing anti-money laundering legislation and the like, it sounds boring. But I assure you, those methods are the only way you are going to get the big boys. They are in their office behind a computer dealing with the movement of money, dealing with supplying, making the contacts. They're not on the street. And if you don't get where they are, where you don't give the legislative power to the police to deal with them where they are, you are doing nothing to address the issue of catching the big boys. There's a reason why one of the most notorious gangsters in United States history, Al Capone, was taken down by tax evasion. You don't catch the big boys on straight. You may have to ricochet a bullet off the left there and take them out. So you have to go after them in a manner where you can catch them. You have to go after them in a manner, again, with the tools necessary. So when you see legislative improvements and reform, law reform commission, again, boring line item inside this appropriations bill, you have to understand that that commission is working at trying to figure out what are the type of legislative tools this country needs to be able to effect the policies and the issues that we believe need to be addressed and are important. So as I said, I could list off numbers. I could say $29 million for the court within the bill. I could say $3.1 million for community legal services. The forensics center that I spoke of, 1.6 to $2.7 million. These are the numbers, and it is appropriate that the money has been put there. But my plea has nothing to do with the money that has been put there. My plea has to do with the holistic effort that is required to address this issue. My plea has to say we recognize government is doing its part, we recognize government is making the investment, but are we as a people doing enough? It is only at that time that we will achieve the objective. So the money says we are building courts, we are building new police stations. The money says we are investing in rehabilitation and reintegration into the society. The money says we are putting the technology. I had a client come to me just to ask a question. They received a picture of their vehicle supposedly traveling above the speed limit. And the camera had taken the shot, and they got a letter from the police department indicating on this day, this place, this vehicle, this registration. Good. We are putting, again, the technology in place to deal with things like speeding and the like. We need to catch up with the legislation because as I pointed out to the good officer who called on the matter, I don't know that there's provisions to charge any owner of a vehicle with speeding. So a good initiative, but again, a situation where the legislation has to catch up with the technology advances. So these estimates do what they are supposed to do. They represent police officers on the streets, judges on the bench, forensic scientists finally in the laboratories, mentors in the community, which is necessary, and investigators following the money, which is the only way we get in those big boys. But it's an investment in national stability and an investment that is a macro exercise and an investment that I ask each and every Barbadian to join in because that's the only way that we are going to succeed. In conclusion, Mr. President, I just want to make a few observations in relation to some contributions made in this chamber. My colleague, Senator Walters, would have referenced, you're the most dangerous one in terms of the attacks. My colleague, Senator Walters, would have referenced wastage in spending. He threw out a figure of $600 million. I can't remember the period that he was speaking to. But part of that $600 million, 1/3 of it, if I remember correctly, $200 million of it related to Harrison Point. Now, I was taken aback. And again, we say Barbadians have short memories. And it's a good thing many days. We should have a short memory. You can get over trauma of the last decade. But the reality is that in having a short memory, it should not mean that we forget what we have gone through. When COVID ravaged this country, there was not a person who felt that a $200 million investment in Harrison Point was unnecessary, unneeded, or imprudent investment. And when Senator Sinclair speaks about the nature of cost versus value, this is a prime example. I am touched by it. I was touched by it. Like many members, I had a family member who passed through that facility. And when my father took the care that he did in that facility, it was so good. When they told me they were transporting him to the QEH, I told them, leave him, please. The man was happy, was being taken care of, and I'm just being honest. I didn't want him moved from there. But the issue wasn't just the care in the facility or the isolation, because there isn't persons who are there only. What did that mean to the public health generally, relative to the fact that we were able to build an isolation facility, put the persons there so that they can be taken care of while protecting the rest of the population? No one should have any words to say.
Mr. President,
What do you raise?
I think the senator is misleading the House in terms of what I reported on my presentation. I said that the $200 million is wasted, and I continue to say only because of the current use of the facility. I did not rubbish the fact that the investment was spent on healthcare during COVID. I referenced the fact that the facility is now being used to house workers from a construction site, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Please continue, Senator Ali.
Well, my good friend needs to recognize that the nuances of his contribution are not necessarily transmitted when persons hear. And I noticed the nice distinction that is taken, but the fact still remains. The value of that facility was more than proven in the time of its use. And I'm not even getting into the issue as to where it is now. I am not even getting there.
Just leave it empty now.
So the point is, that I am sure the powers that be will do what is necessary, but you have to be careful in the manner in which you put forward certain propositions. And it goes back, my friend Senator Trim, Senator Sinclair, cost versus value, cost versus value. And relative to that cost, let me speak again from a position of personal knowledge, because persons may ask themselves, why the cost? You're thinking about outfitting a facility like that, ventilators and the like, in a circumstances where the whole world is seeking the same resources. That impacts cost. That facility was moved from a derelict facility to a fully operational, state-of-the-art facility in weeks. And I was part of that transformation. That has cost. So I just want, again, persons to understand what the numbers mean. It's easy to call the numbers. It's easy to throw them out there without recognizing there's a reason, there's a justification. We throw out a number and it has an emotional impact. And that is it. This is the explanation behind it. And finally, Mr. President, I want to speak on the issue of lofty aspirations as highlighted in this appropriations bill. I have said this a number of times in my life as I reflected upon where Barbados was, why it is where it is, that one of the greatest assets that this country has had the benefit of is the nature of visionary leadership across administrations. It is the greatest one element that speaks to where we stand within the Caribbean community. And when I say visionary leadership across administrations, I go back to the Honourable Errol Barrow. When Errol Barrow indicated the need to invest in free education, there were powers at be who asked, who are you to be spending such a large portion of your GDP on social services? And he said this is necessary. When the Honourable Tom Adams indicated that he was going to build an ABC highway, he was pilloried from pillar to post. Everything that could be attacked about it was said at the time. Can any of us consider Barbados today without the ABC highway grounding our transportation network? When they built the Grantley Adams Airport, 40 plus years, still a gem within the Caribbean community when it comes to the nature of infrastructure development at the airport level. When the Honourable Owen Alpha decided that we were going to deal with investments in the offshore area to meet expansion of our foreign exchange earnings, again, persons could not see the vision. When we did all those treaties across the line to facilitate it, people could not see the vision. Vision is not a bad thing. We do not need leaders who are managers. We need visionary leaders. And when we pronounce on a matter such as mission transformation, that is visionary leadership. When I listen to Senator Reid speak as to his plans, where he wishes to place this country, I am reminded of what Senator Malalow said about, we often look to Singapore. There's nothing wrong with looking to Singapore. There's no reason why this country can't be the Singapore of the Caribbean. Singapore is 284 square miles. I think 6 million residents, half of whom are expats. Half of whom who are expats. And when we make context, their civil services is 4%, while ours is 15%. But remember, it's 4% of 6 million. And that many elements of ministries and civil service requires the same persons, whether you're dealing with it for 10 or whether you're dealing with it for 20 or whether you're dealing with it for 1,000. So that's no attack on our civil service numbers. Visionary leadership is what transforms a country. Visionary leadership is what this country has had the benefit of through a number of the leaders. And I am proud to say that the present leader has continued a trend in the context of that visionary leadership that can only rebound to the benefit of this country and its people. I have no issues in supporting this appropriations bill, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Ali.
Thank you.
Her Honour Senator Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I start with an apology. As you know, all week I have been fighting this horrible allergy to the Sahara dust, in fact, from the beginning of the year. And I am coughing and nasal and got bad feels, sir, to use a Bajan expression, but I rise to make my contribution in this, to this appropriation bill, and I ask in advance for forgiveness for my hoarseness and my coughing. I hope that it will not get too bad during the course of my comments. I frame my comments as I support this appropriation bill under the general theme, ending the plantation economy, the plantation society, the plantation mentality, and framing the Bajan future. I do so, sir, because as I read the appropriation bill, as I read the estimates, as I read the budget, as I read the manifesto on which the budget and the appropriation bill were constructed, as I read what has come to be called, sir, in popular culture, the Red Book, the Red Record of the service of the Barbados Labour Party and its mini manifesto. And listened as well to the speeches made by and large over the course of the last couple days. I saw an emerging theme which recommended itself to me because it was constructed brick by previous speakers, by previous perspectives, and indeed by that which we are coming to examine, analyze, and I think support. I begin, sir, on, like others preceding me, on a very personal note, by expressing gratitude to Almighty God for the opportunity to serve my country, for the honor of serving not just with those who now don't sit here anymore, because as I sat in my place today, I observed the changing faces around the table, and with some sense of joy, the more youthful faces around the table. I think we have fewer women, sadly, but I am optimistic that in time we will correct that. And I am grateful, really, for the, no, not on our side. I'm grateful, really, for the opportunity to continue to serve my country. We do not all share the same politics, we do not all share the same perspective, but I believe we share the same purpose. That is to see the best possible Barbados. And for that, I am grateful to serve with minds that I think are fine, hearts that are willing, and hands that are committed. If I may pause, sir, as well, to say how much of a thrill it was for me to hear our young people speak. It really justifies why we needed to continue free education at the university for these young people. I want in particular, sir, with your permission, to say that they were all excellent speeches, but in particular, to identify that of Senator Janelle Odle. I have been making speeches in this chamber since 1994. It was one of the best maiden speeches I have ever heard. Vision, depth, content, but sir, the style. Oh, the language was elegant. She was waltzing on the English language, not walking up on it, sir. She was on her toes and then on her heels, and then she would swing around and drop an expression in you that you had to sit back in the chair and look at her and smile. She could not see those smiles, but young lady, I tell you, across the room there were, and I'm sure in your home and in your community there were, and I recommend all of you to take yourselves seriously as you serve here and as you serve this country. You have shown that you have tremendous potential and a lot to offer. I forgive you for reading your speeches initially, but remember the rules say that you must not. So as you gain confidence, you must seek to speak with less dependence on those notes. 60 years. In November, we will celebrate independence, our 60 years of independence and 5 years of being a republic. What does that mean in the context of this appropriation bill? What does it mean in the context of a vision being framed for a small, open economy with a population that, as someone pointed out yesterday, is the size of a U.S. town, mid-sized town, not even a large town? What does it mean in the context of those countries so much bigger than ours, framing themselves as vulnerable middle powers, when we are really minnows, not powers? How then do we get power based on principle, on vision, on capacity, on excellent delivery, and on a people that has the confidence that they are equal to the challenges of the era and have the skills to deliver and to deliver with excellence? That really is a challenge facing Barbados at this time. As you look around and you see the economic, the geopolitical, and social challenges the world over, how does a microstate navigate these waters? Give its people the confidence to do so at home and abroad, so that we grow our economy, stabilize our economy, grow our economy, stabilize our society, protect our environment, and orient and ground ourselves on our cultural values and mores. That is a philosophical challenge that underpins the platform of the appropriation bill. I was gratified to see that in the budget itself, and certainly in the appropriation bill, the government, in the person of the Minister of Finance, demonstrated a high understanding of and sensitivity to existing circumstances, and therefore sought to give the numbers a leverage of a development thrust, cushioning for the vulnerable, the positioning of Barbados given the stresses of the day, while at the same time ensuring a degree of social stability in the context of the current challenges, and with the level of resilience that allows us to have sustainable stability. I'm going to attempt in speaking about the economy, there have been so many cautions to stay in one's lane that even though I have done economics, I do not consider myself by any means an economic specialist there. In fact, I hate numbers, though I'm not a specialist. I do have an understanding of them. I mean, I did after all manage to get an MBA, so I do understand numbers, but I do not consider myself an economic expert. But I feel that I need to look and to frame my comments in the context of a question that one heard repeatedly after the budget speech was delivered. And it was this: how is the government effecting structural reform of economy and society in the light of the geopolitical and other challenges which we are currently facing and which appear as if they will worsen? And how will these then affect our macroeconomic fundamentals? And how do we continue to govern in the context of an international environment over which we have no control? That's the challenge, sir. And I start by making the point that the government has sought to solidify, reinforce, and cement Barbados' macroeconomic fundamentals. And one sees this reflected in the appropriation bill. The government has sought to reduce and has succeeded in reducing inflation, in diversifying exports, in ensuring that there is foreign exchange adequacy to create a buffer in the economy for goods and services that we will need to purchase. It has exhibited fiscal discipline, even while working with the IMF in creating a Barbados-developed BERT program. And it has done all of this and still managed to keep the economic engine turning over, the economy growing, and creating the lowest unemployment in our history. Now, what does the lowest unemployment mean? It means that ordinary Barbadians, that average Barbadians get up every day to go to a job to earn a living from which they can have dignity and experience upward social mobility. It means that those who may have been pushed into opportunistic crime because they have no options can now find work. It means as you simultaneously invest in training of your young people and retraining of your labor force through initiatives like NTI, which are free at the point of delivery, that you are producing a national skill set within your population pool that allows them to grab global, national, and regional opportunity, that allows them in time of challenge to pivot and seize opportunity, and allows them to identify and for themselves create opportunity. And this is important because a lot of our young people now have a side hustle. Whether they have a job or not, they are in school being entrepreneurial. They are out there earning a living. I mean, people would told my generation, get a job. These young people are interested in creating income, in creating wealth, in helping to build out an economy, in selling goods and services outside of Barbados because they are not constrained by our geographical boundaries. They see what the world has to offer. They see it in the palm of their hand, and they identify and locate themselves as to where they can go, given support from government, to gain market share for themselves and for the country. And therefore, this low unemployment data and statistic that we are seeing, it isn't just a number, it is a meaning for individuals whose lives are being transformed because this government has grown an economy that creates a space for them to live with comfort as Barbadians. And that is not to say that there are not people who don't have challenges, because there are, but equally we have seen how government is putting in place new welfare and other support structures to help the vulnerable and to those who are underemployed or underpaid, and to ensure that they too get a slice of the national economic pie, or to put it in a Bajan context, a bowl of the Bajan economic cocoa. The government has sought to reinforce the capacity of the country's principal foreign exchange earners, so that when the minister says in the other place that we are no longer on blacklists or grey lists, he is not speaking in a technocratic context. What he is saying to the country is that the government has so managed its business that at the international level, we are getting credit for being a clean jurisdiction, that we are being rewarded for as a jurisdiction that does its due diligence, that persons who hear of Barbados can feel comfortable doing business in Barbados. And this is a major consideration, that because international businesses, when we were on blacklists and grey lists, doing business with Barbados would have deleterious international consequences for them and for their business. So even if they were attracted to business to Barbados, they would not come. That they now feel free to come and invest here because our reputation at the international level, by rating institutions and by those who seek to set standards for global performance, rate Barbados highly, and we are no longer stigmatized at the international level. This is an important redefinition of how we do business in international financial services and in the global marketplace. Equally, the strengthening of the tourism sector has to be commended. There has never been a period in our history when there were simultaneously 9 hotels under construction. Now, the implications for the rising price of fuel and what is going to happen in relation to long-haul flights is something at which we are going to have to look. But the reality is that we have prepared ourselves, and we continued that preparation through COVID. And now that COVID is over, we have been able to reap the benefits of pre-planning and investment, so that the construction of 9 new hotels is creating jobs, not only in the tourism sector. And people who say that we are relying too much on tourism, the reality is that tourism pays the bills. So that is like somebody going to work, going to their job, and you are criticizing them for going to their job. That is what is paying the bills. Tourism is paying our bills. But let us understand that when we speak about tourism, we are not just talking about hotel structure. What we are talking about is a cascading impact in the context of the national economy. We are talking about farmers supplying hotels. We are talking about people, tourists going to nail techs and hairstylists. We are talking about social media marketers and influencers, local and those coming to Barbados and speaking to the world about what they are seeing, experiencing, and enjoying here. When we talk about the 9 hotels, we are talking about taxi drivers and delivery men and truck drivers and porters. When we talk about 9 hotels, we are talking about maids and gardeners and people who have studied management and people who have studied marketing. When we talk about 9 hotels, we are talking about people who have a variety of skills or businesses that are going to benefit directly and indirectly from the tourism spend of increased arrivals in Barbados and larger more occupancy rooms. We're talking about rooms, we're talking about beds, we're talking about villas, we're talking about Airbnbs, and we are talking about average Bajans making money directly from the tourism sector, because now, as more and more tourists seek authentic national and local experiences, you got to contend with them in the line at muster. You have to contend with them on the bus and the ZR. They are walking into shops and they're in the line, they're in the queue. You see them all over the place, enjoying a truly Bajan experience. And the businesses that are operating, whether it is women-owned and led, male-owned and led, large or small, a lot of businesses in Barbados are benefiting from increased tourism arrivals, and the arrivals that we expect as a result of having increased bed capacity are only going to add to that. But there are critical linkages that in the reformation or the restructuring of the economy that are also being made. I gave an example just now of fish being supplied, for instance, to hotels. Let's take that at another level. The opposition complained of the money spent at Bay Gardens. Go into Bay Gardens. See who is earning money in Bay Gardens. See who is in Bay Gardens dancing on Friday nights. See who is in there making sport or having social activity. Go into Bay Gardens and see if the tourists don't stop you from getting a seat. Go into Bay Gardens and see the entrepreneurial activity of all types that is taking place. And fishermen and fisher folk, I should say, earning the kind of living that would never have been possible unless this Barbados Labour Party administration had the vision and had built out Bay Gardens. So the linkages that are being made are between, for instance, the agricultural sector, the fisheries sector, small business entrepreneurship and protection. Technology and young people is another critical area where linkages are being made. Young people are tech savvy. I don't know if they're born with it from out of the womb. I see my little 2-year-old niece pick up a telephone, and the thing she is doing with it, I'm looking to learn because I cannot figure out how she is getting it done and confident with it. While I would say, sweet boy, show me this thing here, how you do this. I'm confident with it. It is highly amazing. So that when governments invest money in the agricultural sector, for instance, to make it more technology driven, to increase production rates, to attract young people who previously had no interest in agriculture as a career, but now see how they can earn revenues, especially when they're given the land, especially when the technology is made available to them. So they can earn, they can contribute to the broader economy, and they can then use these skills that they have to create broader investment within the economy. So when people ask, what is the government doing to reform the economy. The government is diversifying the economy at one level, strengthening the macro fundamentals at the other, and third of all, training a talent pool that is tech savvy to gauge and gain the opportunities available within this new local and global market space. What are the other linkages? There's an obvious link with culture. I start, for instance, with Cricket World Cup. The point has been made in here, government, if I set up a business, it is my responsibility to make a profit. Government is not necessarily to make profit. Government is to enable the development and stabilization of the society, the growth of the economy, and to create for the individual who, without the intervention of government, would not have it, an opportunity for them to earn. And when they earn, they then build out the economy. So that you can't say that a $4 million investment in Carifesta was wrong. Nor can you say that a $30 million investment in Carifesta was wrong. It was the enabling capital to ensure that a country saw that its culture was saleable. It was the enabling capital that allowed a country to feel proud of itself. It was the enabling capital which allowed the country to say we have great event organization skills, and that is a saleable skill in the marketplace. And it is important in the context when you are seeking to redefine a plantation society to invest in culture. When you are colonized, one of the first things that is taken away is your culture. You are separated from your sense of self. You are made to feel like nobody. You don't have dignity because you do not recognize that who you are is beautiful or valuable or desirable, or that somebody would envy you for who you are. So when the government invests in the culture of Barbados, what it is doing is saying by extension to the citizen that Barbados has something that the rest of the world can buy, can come for, that we can offer, because it is back to the Arabaro mirror image. When we look in the mirror, we must see a people of whom we can be proud and in whom we are willing to invest. And when you invest in yourself, when you invest in your people, when you invest in your nation, when you give people a sense of what they can accomplish and say to them that you are somebody, the sense of national pride that Barbadians felt from Carifesta traveled across the region and the world. Everybody was talking about how exceptional it was, about the fact that they had never experienced anything like it, about the quality of Bajan artists and Bajan goods. And let me say, we do not point to the people who benefit. You see, when we talk about $30 million, we don't understand that, like the Haynesville Youth Club got $8,000 in performing fees. It helped families that were unemployed. It helped to send school children. It made them feel proud and showed them you could earn $1 from culture. You can drum well enough that somebody would actually pay to hear you. And if you could dance, oh my. So that the sense of pride within the community, the money that was made there that was then spent back in the community, how do you value that? Who is doing the analysis to say to those young people that their earnings, the $30 million that was spent for them to earn, should never have been spent? You can't say it. In addition to that, some of the artists that came here, artisans, went into communities and trained people. Haynesville benefited from artists from Jamaica, Trinidad, and Cuba who gave them graphic arts lessons, painting lessons, all kinds of training. And they then took the skills that they were given, refurbished or repainted, beautified the Haynesville Police Post. Well, the Haynesville Police Post is not, that's what it is called because that is what it was originally. It is really an informal community center. How do you put a value on that? So we have to understand that if we are to break a plantation mentality, if we are to end plantation economy, if we are to get rid of a plantation society, the first investment has to come in culture, and it has to come in people who carry that culture in their hearts and in their minds and in their bosoms. So when there is complaint heard in some quarters in here about the festival economy that Barbados is creating or the BLP is creating, and all we want to do is to get people to dance and fair and forget that we have problems. The festival economy is the festival events calendar is really a festival economy, so that you have people who are prepared to come to Barbados because there are activities all year. It isn't just that the beaches are great or the place is beautiful. There is something for them to do that they can enjoy. And the people who work in the festivals, whether it is the hair braiders, whether it is those who do drinks and bars, whether it is those who do high-end coffees. I hear people talking about drinking bubble tea. I hear tourists ordering Moby and passion fruit juice and tamarind. Somebody is selling those, so that we have to understand when we build a festival economy that you are moving activity from community to community in the same way as was done with regathering, which was again widely criticized. During regathering, I went down some holes in St. Lucie and some other places that I did not know existed. I passed some potholes too, but that did not stop hundreds of people from turning up at the events. Not DLP events, no, BLP, yeah. Because vendors complained that the DLP events were so poor, nobody used to turn out and they could make $1 at all. But the reality is, yeah, food, yes. That is a fact. Sir, there are some services that are utterly amazing. It did not occur to me that a person, and people come into Barbados to do it, and local people also have the skill, that people could make money bronzing your skin. So that for Cropover, the night before or 2 days before, you don't you go and you get fixed up so your skin tone looks perfectly even when you are in your micro bikini. Of course, you can't bathe until after the event, but that's another matter, sir. And, sir, when you have events now, and sir, this is a service from which I can benefit because I'm very blessed. There is now a service where you can actually have your booth taped, sir, to reduce them. Sir, that is a service that people offer, which is widely sought after. The vacancy, sir, you want to learn the skill. You have to be skilled, sir. You have to know how to do it. I don't know how much you know, sir. You'll get training. Very, very well, sir. Very well, sir. But there are all kinds of offshoot industries and offshoot services that in your mind you would not think of. Sir, let me give you an analogy that takes us in a totally different direction. It is what it means to have vision as a leader. I remember the arguments over the Spring Garden Highway and the ABC Highway and how the DLP vilified Tom Adams over it. It was a waste, it would be a white elephant, it would be unnecessary. A previous speaker spoke to asking whether we could imagine Barbados without it because of the transport access. It isn't just the transport. Drive from the airport to St. Lucie, housing, businesses, vendors, malls, entertainment facilities. That was the vision. Nobody caught it at the time. We want this long road forward to do people didn't get it. And I think
It was called the Industrial Access Road, that was the original.
that is a fact. The original name was the Industrial Access Highway, I think it was, the Industrial Access Highway. Well, nobody calls it that now. And indeed, a lot of what is being done, things about which Senator Reid spoke, the reindustrialization, the Green Gateway, a lot of this, it's still too vague, still too visionary, still too much up in the clouds. But I hope that I will live to see, as I have lived to see what happened with the highway, that I will live to see a lot of what is now being spoken about bear fruit in the transformation of this little society and to make our economy a big one. Sir, I move on then to the issue, and you will have realized that I've started to talk about, I spoke about plantation economy, I segued into plantation society and ending the plantation society, and I am moving, sir. Yeah, I'm not doing too badly, and I didn't cough. Praise be to Jesus. He clearly wants me to make this speech. Thank you, God. Oops. God has a sense of humor, unless Ray has something to do with that. That's right, So moving, sir, into the area, moving further into the area of ending the plantation society. In the plantation economy, goods and services were produced for the sole benefit of the profit of the owner. In the economy that we are creating and building out, goods and services are being produced for the benefit of the economy and the dignity and financial well-being of the individual. In the plantation society, labor was dispensable. You didn't have to value people because they came a dime a dozen. You fire them without rights. So that when this government strengthens the hands of trade unions, what it is doing by extension is saying to our people, you have dignity that deserves protection. Your labor has value. Your rights, you have rights. And they are going to be embodied in law so that you cannot be abused or exploited. And so what we have been doing there is part of this reform of the economy and restructuring of the society to give people a different mirror image of, or an improved mirror image of themselves, and to say to the society as a whole, look, wanna wear something, sir. A part of that is the way in which we're training our young people. At UE, the expansion of programs and numbers at SJPP, at BCC, at the Cumming University College, which really was part of the 94 to 2008 that was stopped. It is part of our saying to our society that you are not disposable. And even if the world economy is moving in the direction of a gig economy, even if the world economy is moving in a direction of less security of tenure, we are going to create a national platform of rights that allows our people to still have a sense of comfort and security in their jobs and in the marketplace. We see this again, sir, in the way in which government has committed to providing $5,000 at birth to every Barbadian born at the time of republic, we became a republic, and since. So this is phenomenal. It is phenomenal because what black people are unable to do is to build intergenerational wealth. For a majority of us, we get a big house, we leave that house to our children. Sometimes by the time we die, we've not been working for years because we've been retired long. The house is in disrepair and the children fighting over it, or some of them go away and they leave it abandoned. That's all we have. And a car. And it is all financed by the bank. However, if you can say to every baby that is born, when you baptize them and make the sign of the cross, and here, take your little $5,000 certificate with you when you go home. What you are doing is changing that child's future. You are changing that child's life. Because it means that the child, I spoke about Haynesville just now, the child born in Haynesville, to the person who is a maid in somebody's house. And I say that, sir, because that's my background. My mother was a maid, so I'm pointing at nobody. That child has an investment that their parent would hardly ever be able to afford to give to them. And over the course of their life, 18 years it is invested. They can buy land with it. Invest it in a business. Use it to transform. It is so transformational for those who are poor. There are a lot of people who never have $5,000 in their hand or in their bank account at once. But your child, by just being born into this society, will now be entitled to that. And I can hear commentators on the radio, I only given the budget a 6. It doesn't transform anything. There's no reforming here and this and that. And nonsense. Everything about it is really absolutely transformational. Sorry, too old to have children, but I mean, you know. True, because Elizabeth had hers when she was very advanced in years, for those of you who know your Bible. And I am Elizabeth, so. Yeah, she scoffed at the idea. But so, sir, I want to go. Thank you very much, sir. So that is transformational. The other Barbadians, the other component of disposable income and equity and capital that I want to add here is the way in which government has been dealing with the issue and continued in this appropriation bill with the issue of land taxes, sir. In a previous Barbados Labour Party administration between 76 and 86, I'm hearing 76 was a good year because of the people in here who were born then. But at that time, property taxes, estate taxes crippled many people because they were so high. We have since then stopped, Barbados Labour Party administration stopped estate taxes, and now this administration has been moving where it has been cutting property taxes. Most people, I would say the average house is worth around $500,000. Clearly, there would be some that would be worth significantly more, but the average house that you see if you drive up Station Hill, etc., if you drive along Black Rock, if you drive along our major roadways, is worth in the region of $500. So that means $500,000. So that means that with is it 400 or 450? $400,000. You don't have to pay land tax on the first 400,000. That for many people, you are paying no land taxes at all. That you have a chance to be a property owner without fetters of taxation on you. That if your house is worth 600,000, you're only paying 200,000 in land tax. This means that possibly, what would you pay for around that? Maybe $800 a year or so in land taxes previously. That is more disposable income that you have to spend, to invest. And if you are clever, you would use it to invest in something. Because you would not have had it anyway. You would have had to pay it to government. So take it and invest it in something. But it means that what we are doing is strengthening Barbados as a property-owning democracy and allowing average Bajans greater access to homes and property ownership. And this is another extremely important mechanism of transformation and structural reform. Sorry, I did apologize at the start, but I want to apologize. My voice has been doing pretty well, but I think that I need to be cautious with it as we go forward. Another area, sir, in which there has been substantial investment on the part of this government is in the area of small businesses, particularly in relation to trust loans, where we have said to the public, if you want to invest in a business, you may not be bankable in the context of the banking system, but we have enough confidence that the average Barbadian will pay back a loan, will hold an opportunity, will wrestle it to the ground, will build up their business, will employ other people, will support their families. So that small business, or the hand of small business people, the hands have now been strengthened in a way that did not exist previously. And this is why wherever you go across the country now, you are seeing all kinds of small businesses crop up, from food trucks to people modifying their garage to do even things like studios, sir. Modifying their garage to do nails, to set up aesthetic shops and salons, where you can go and the people are trained and you can get high quality services. Barbering. People are what do you call it, when they do cars, valeting cars from their homes and so on. So that is because there is new impetus and new financing being given to people to carry out businesses and to set up businesses and to finance businesses in order to earn a living from themselves and increase the level of economy in the level of activity in the economy. When it comes to food places, I am amazed at the number of food places in small communities where you can go, whether you call at the window or the door, or you sit down in the garage or the veranda or outside. There are a lot of food places offering high quality food. So if you don't want or cannot afford to go to the more expensive places, a lot of people who are chefs and cooks in the hotel sector, in the tourism sector, are doing stuff at their homes on weekends, and you can get the same good tasting food, excellent service for a quarter of the price. And it isn't just in the food sector. Throughout the economy, there has been a new momentum, new impetus given to Sorry, I assure you again that I'm not allergic. It is simply that I have very, very bad reaction to Sahara dust. So my coughing, nobody is under threat or at risk of contagion or anything of the sort. In any event, I got a doctor close by. I was pleased it has not been spoken about a lot. But what we are seeing emerging from the appropriation bill, and I apologize, sir, I was up all that night coughing and coughing and coughing to the extent that I wasn't sure I would make it here today. So I did not sit and pull all the numbers. So I think that is a deficiency in my remarks, and I ask for your forgiveness. But one of the points that I was going to make is that the appropriation bill also seeks to build out institutions in the country and to create partnerships with the church and other institutions. There's the usual private-public investment in large initiatives, but where this government is often accused of being immoral, ungodly, wicked, and other of carrying out nefarious acts. This government has been the only government in the history of the country that I am aware. I remember a previous administration, I won't call the name, where you could get tax relief for donations to the church. I think they even removed them. But this administration is now giving to setting up an initial grant of $5 million for churches. It is important because, sir, I firmly believe we grew up in Sunday school. We had to go. There were no options. You went morning with your parents and probably evening with your grandmother or your auntie or some neighbor or somebody. Some people went to two different churches. One Pentecostal, one more traditional, because of these family dynamics. In Sunday school, it was in Sunday school, sir, that I first learned public speaking. Yes. It was in Sunday school that I first learned presenting to an audience, to stand up in church and say your little recitation. In fact, sir, yes, and you're swinging. No, it's a fact. You learned to get on with other people. You learned cooperation. You learned the value of the human being, the love of God, what it was to love your fellow man, how important it is, a value system that was very much Barbadian. And our churches need to step up now. Bring children back into Sunday school. When I grew up, you would see parish priests walking through the community. They knew the families. We need to get our priests into the communities, get our little ones into Sunday school and church so that they're not on the streets, so that they're not are being targeted by nefarious persons so that they are not vulnerable to the blandishments of the devil. And when they go into Sunday school, they learn all kinds of things, all kinds of skills. They have a lot of fun because there are now a lot more interactive classes and so on. I remember, so now that I'm talking about that, I as a child, I was asked to read a lesson. Of course, my mother was sitting in the pew purring with pride, as I had to rehearse it about 1,000 times though, you know, before I could get up there. So mommy made me rehearse it and I read flawlessly. And then a little boy came after me, and he didn't read as well. And an old lady sitting in the church was heard to say, "All right, son, you read them fast and get rid of them." But sir, the important thing was that young boy had his first experience of public speaking, of knowing what it was like to sit down and have the whole church looking at you silent in anticipation. And then the next time, he read much better. Because somebody took him aside and said, "Well, let's practice the lesson. Don't be frightened. I just sit down in the front. If you get nervous, you look at me." Look at me. Our churches, Senator Cannon Rogers is not here today, but our churches, some of them are doing some very good work. James Street Methodist, my own church, we have a steel pan on which we are training young people. Belmont Methodist, you don't have to be a member of the church. You can just show up and say, "I want to learn." We have musical bands where people are learning everything from the violin to the guitar to the drums to Congo drums. It's all there. And so other churches, and I'm not saying my church alone, other churches are doing the work. And I want to encourage the churches to apply for some of this money. If you use it up, I'm sure the Prime Minister will give more. But so that you can carry out, yes, I'm speaking on her behalf, this is because it's so important. So that you can carry out more social intervention programs, teaching our young people skills, keeping them off of the streets. And the thing about this is that panists are well paid. It is a skill that you can use in the entertainment industry. Those who play the violin, those who learn to drum. So it isn't just that they're learning to drum, they're getting a sense of what they are capable of, but at the same time, they are getting a skill that they can use to help themselves and their families, and a skill that they can carry with them for life. And often, when you learn a skill, so I like to cook and bake. That's a skill. It's a skill for which people are paid. There are those who play musical instruments. There are those who may weave baskets or other things. These are skills that not only can earn you money, but create a sense of peace and comfort. Last week I was home because of this constant coughing. I didn't want to go into the office and stuff. And I took some time and I really rolled out cakes and dishes. And I just had fun in my kitchen, which I don't get a chance to do often, because you're always on a day. The point that I'm making is our churches are doing this work. And normally they do not have the capital to carry out the programs at scale, but that this kind of financing will allow for churches which are entrepreneurial and churches which want to do more work to be able to rescue and support more of our young people, and I urge them to do so. Sir, I have addressed the issue of ending the plantation economy, ending our plantation society, and I turn, sir, to the final area, which is the issue of the plantation mentality. What do I mean? What do I mean? Sir, I am Bajan, not by birth, but like Jonathan, Senator Reid, I think of myself as very much a Barbadian. plantation system, we are not taught to treat each other with respect or courtesy. In the plantation system, because you know that you are a cog in the production wheel and that your neighbor and your relative also is, we often treat them in they are treated in dismissive ways in the plantation system. And this is an attitude that we have ingrained. When you are told that blackness has no value, that black skin is undesirable, that you too fat, you too black, your hair too naughty, you're not gonna amount to much. You start to see yourself in that way. And therefore, this issue of reframing our point of self-reference becomes absolutely critical. And it has to manifest itself in relation to our attitudes. When people go into access services both in the private and public sector, but more in the public sector than private, because in the private sector, if you treat customers too bad, somebody will fire you. In the public sector, particularly at QEH, we have a lot of people with exceptional skill and training. But what people often complain about is the discourtesy with which they are treated. They are snapped at. They are ignored. They are insulted. They are given harsh words. And then people want to talk about burnout. I am not going to dispute that there may be some element of burnout. But burnout does not allow you to look at a fellow Barbadian and insult them or treat them unkindly. And I have had my experiences across the public and private sector, going to places where I'm not recognized. What you want? Listen, come back tomorrow here. I ain't taking you on today. And in one instance, I was told by a person, my braids are too tight for me to bother today, too tight. Yes. Sir, this is the mentality of the plantation, that we do not see ourselves as capable of excellence. We do not fight to perform with excellence. We do not come to work to be exceptional at what we do. And we don't do it to the best of our ability. Can't take them no more, look, that's enough for me today. And you see it in our lack of productivity. You see it in attitudes. People who are employers complain. So I don't even want to get into the way marijuana smoking has now become perversive everywhere, because that's another speech. But my sister, who is an employer, has had people turn up for interviews smelling of marijuana and with the scissors in their pocket. I went, but why you come? Why will you have a scissors for? I got a bad habit, you know. All of this, how do we see ourselves? What really do we want to give? All of us want to get fully what we are due from our employer. But what do we want to give to the employer and the customer? Because at the end of the day, you have to give something. And it has to be something of value. The plantation mentality tells us not to do this. There were questions raised about implementation, sir. And the issue with implementation goes back to the plantation mentality. It has to do with the fact that we are not as productive as we can be. It has to do with poor attitudes in the labor market. And it has to do with the fact, sir, that the government, in my view, needs to carry out a program of extensive training across the public sector so that there is not a disconnect between the vision of the government and the capacity capacity and delivery intent of those in the civil service who are charged with the responsibility of delivering on the vision. While the politicians get the blame, the reality is that they are not the ones who are the implementers of the policy. And until we can get our people to abandon the plantation and recognize that the way forward has to do and rest not on the politicians but on each and every one of us, then we will not effect the kind of national transformation that can deliver to Barbados, this generation and the next, the kind of excellence, brilliance, promise, iconic status globally. We are not going to be able to do it. Sir, you have signaled to me that it is time for me to wind up. I will do so, sir, and make one quick final point, and it is this. Part of what this appropriation bill does is address the issue of positioning Barbados globally. There are often criticisms about what is it that I do, what is it that members of cabinet do. Last year, Barbados hosted for the first time it met outside of a developed country. Barbados hosted the board of the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. 175 people or more came for the meeting. It was an important new global initiative. Barbados sat on the inaugural board and the Prime Minister asked me to serve as Barbados's representative. In the 2 years that I served, and I'm saying this because I want Barbadians to understand cost versus value. A point made by Senior Minister Senator Sinclair. In the 2 years, I went to Korea, I went to the Philippines twice, I went to Abu Dhabi, and somewhere else, I don't remember, but at least 4 countries that it would have cost considerable amounts to send a Barbados delegation. What did we bring home? We brought a meeting of 150 people here. More than half stayed on to spend time in Barbados. Not at their organization's expense, at their own expense. 2 have decided to buy property in Barbados because they fell so in love with the place. Several are coming back. What is the financial value, the economic value of that? But, sir, it is my absolute honor to say to the Senate that with the support of my advisor, Ricky Marshall, sir, I take leave to call his name, beg your leave to call his name. Barbados serving on the board was able to persuade the FRLD that for small island developing states and for least developed countries, we need funding not as loans, but as grants. And sir, when our term ended on that board, the methodology or the operating methods of the board became known as the Barbados Implementation Modalities. And, sir, we were able to come away with the methodologies, having agreed that SIDS and LDCs will get 50% of the funding available, not as loans, but as grants. So that if we had another barrel tomorrow, we could go, God forbid, we could go to that fund and get money for fishermen as grants, not loans. So that, sir, I speak to this budget, this appropriation bill, in the context of abandoning a plantation society, in the context of ending a plantation economy, with the appeal to put an end and put behind us to the plantation mentality, and with sharing what is possible for our positioning, not just as Barbados, but for our changing the world and defining what happens in the international space if we are willing as Barbadians to make the effort. Mr. President, sir, I commend this appropriation bill not just to the chamber, but to the country.
Thank you very much, Your Honor, Senator Thompson. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this sitting of the Senate be suspended for lunch until 2:50 p.m.
The question is that this sitting be suspended until 2:50 p.m. today. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. No. The ayes have it. This sitting is suspended until 2:50 p.m. today.